Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is part 1 of our story. If you like this what if story and want to see part 2, let me know in the comments below. Before we start, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. Also, check the description for more great content and my playlist. This story was posted by 𝗧𝗵𝗲 on Wattpad. Now let's start. Mom. Izuku's voice echoed weakly in the quiet apartment. His small feet padded softly on the wooden floor as he stepped into the living room, clutching the hem of his all-might-themed pajama shirt. The lights were off, and the only glow came from the muted television screen, still showing highlights from a recent hero battle. But his mother, inko Midoriya, didn't turn to look at him. She sat on the couch, stiff, her hands folded on her lap, her eyes locked on the screen as if it would answer the questions swirling in her mind. Mom. Izuku tried again, a little louder this time, his voice quivering with confusion more than fear. Izuku, I had a dream last night that I saved a lot of people. Everyone cheered for me. Even you did. You hugged me and called me your hero. Inko flinched slightly, barely, like a twitch in her shoulder, but she said nothing. Izuku stepped closer. Izuku, do you remember when we went to see the All Might exhibit last year? I said I wanted to be a hero just like him. He tried to smile. Izuku, you said I could do anything if I worked hard enough. Remember? You said I was your little champion. She inhaled deeply through her nose but still didn't speak. Izuku, Dr. Tsubasa said, he said I can't be a hero. He said I don't have a quirk. But that doesn't mean I can't try, right? He paused, voice cracking. Right, Mom. Inko finally turned her head. Her eyes were red. Not from crying, Izuku realized with a pit in his stomach, but from exhaustion as if tears had dried up long ago. Inko, why Izuku? She said softly, her tone more tired than angry, but it cut sharper than any scolding ever had. Inko, why did it have to be you? He froze. I prayed, she continued, voice hollow. Izuku, every day, since you were a baby. I prayed you'd be special, that you'd have something, anything, just a spark. You were always so sweet, so kind. I thought you deserved to shine. One Izuku took a trembling step forward. Izuku, but I can still shine, can't I? Maybe not with a quirk, but, no, she said quickly, shaking her head. Inko, no, you don't understand, Izuku. It's not just about trying. It's not about effort anymore. You're quirkless. That means the world won't accept you. That means you'll get hurt. You'll be cast aside. She paused, biting her lower lip. Inko, I just wanted you to be normal. Not laughed at. Not pitted. Izuku, but I'm still me, he whispered. Izuku, I'm still Izuku. I still want to help people. I want to save people, even if it's just one person at a time. Inko, and what happens when they don't want you to? Inko's voice broke, a hint of desperation in it now. Inko, what happens when people look at you and say, what can he do? Do you know what people do to those who don't have a place in this society? They push them out. They forget them. They let them fall. Izuku lowered his head. Izuku, I thought you'd still believe in me. She looked away. Inko, I want to. I really do. But I don't know how to anymore. There was a long silence between them. The TV continued playing its loop, showing a pro-hero lifting rubble from a collapsed building. Izuku's voice was barely audible. Izuku, did I do something wrong? One Inko's breath caught. She stood suddenly, walking past him toward the hallway. Inko, you should go to bed, Izuku. It's late. Mom, I said go to bed. She didn't look back. Her voice was firm, distant, final. Izuku stood alone in the living room, the weight of the world pressing down on his small shoulders. He glanced at the screen. The hero on the screen smiled proudly as citizens clapped and cheered. He turned away and walked slowly to his room, his footsteps heavier than they should have been for a child. Izuku, I still want to be a hero, he whispered to the dark hallway. Izuku, even if no one believes in me. Even if you don't. I still want to be one. No answer came. Only the soft buzz of the TV behind him. And for the first time, the silence felt like the loudest rejection of all. Years later I was a fool. One that day, when the doctor's words came out so casually, like he was talking about the weather, "Your son's pinky toe joint shows no sign of the extra evolution. I'm sorry, but it looks like he's one of the 20% who won't develop a quirk." My mother's expression changed. Not dramatically. Not with a gasp or a scream. It was subtle. A twitch in her eye. A hesitation in her voice. Like the hope she'd carried had quietly died, and she didn't want me to see its funeral. She never looked at me the same again. And my life, what do you expect when you're quirkless? From the moment the word quirkless was stamped onto my existence, I became less than everyone else. At first, I didn't understand. I still wore my All Might backpack proudly. I still tried to smile when kids talked about their powers, showing off little sparks, floating toys, making things glow. I clapped along, laughed when I was supposed to, even cheered them on. I didn't know the rules had changed. But then they started looking at me differently. Not with hate. No, that would have been easier to deal with. It was pity, contempt. That mix of emotions people get when they want to act nice but also feel superior. Teachers stopped calling on me when we talked about hero careers. Kids stopped inviting me to quirk training games. The desks around me always had just a bit more space, like being quirkless was contagious. And then there was Katsuki. Deku, he called me useless. A name that stuck like tar. He'd been my friend once. We'd played together, watched All Might clips side by side, shouted catchphrases in unison. But the moment the truth came out, he pulled away. No more smiles. No more shared dreams. Just mocking, shoves, explosions near my face. Because to someone like him, someone powerful, I was an insult to everything he believed in. I was someone reaching for the same stars with no wings. The world doesn't hate quirkless people. Not openly. That would be too honest. No, it just forgets them. It pushes them to the background, gives them side jobs, makes sure they know their place. Heroes are for those with power. Hope is for those with potential. People like me. We're background noise. We're the statistics that don't make it into motivational speeches. The first time I saw that video of All Might, him saving people with a smile, a whole bus full of innocents hanging by a thread, I thought, I want to be just like him. He stood there, the embodiment of everything I believed in. He didn't just fight villains, he made people feel safe. He made them feel like tomorrow would be okay. That was the dream. So even when the world turned cold, even when my mother stopped believing, even when teachers gave up on me before I even tried, I held on. I kept notebooks. I wrote everything down. Hero behaviors, power analysis, weaknesses and strengths. I knew I didn't have a quirk, but I thought maybe, just maybe, if I understood heroes better than anyone else, I could be useful. But I was wrong. That day in class, when the teacher talked about career paths, when he joked that everyone here wants to be a hero, when Katsuki proudly declared he'd apply to you. And everyone clapped like it was already decided, no one looked at me. Flashback: the classroom buzzed with chatter, desks cluttered with notebooks, the sun casting sharp lines through the windows. Mr. Yamada stood at the front, casually tapping through the slides. His voice, though enthusiastic, was mostly ignored, until one sentence silenced the room. "Mr. Yamada, you're all third years now, so it's time to start thinking seriously about your future. Most of you wrote down traditional careers, but one of you is aiming for you." Hi. The class erupted. Laughter. Scoffs. A few genuine chuckles. Mr. Yamada tried to keep the mood light, but someone had already seen the name on the form. You, eh? Seriously. Who's dumb enough to think they can get in there without a quirk? They all turned. Dozens of eyes landed on Izuku Midoriya. He froze. His fingers twitched against the desk, and his notebook, once clenched with pride, felt like it weighed 1,000 tons. The green ink he'd used to draw out battle scenarios and analyze hero tactics seemed childish now. Useless. Bakugo's chair scraped back loudly as he stood. "Bakugo, don't lump me in with that diamond nerd," he said with venom. "Bakugo, you think someone quirkless can be a hero?" The room grew quiet again, but not out of respect. They were waiting. Hungry. Bakugo didn't disappoint. "Bakugo, you're worse than a joke. You're a Fing delusion. Do you write fan letters with your tears, too?" He knew about Izuku's depression, his issues with his mother, and how fed up his life is. But what did he do with it? Used it to mock Izuku even more. Izuku didn't respond. His lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. He wanted to say something. Anything. But nothing would matter. The words wouldn't rise. Just air. Later, when class ended, Izuku packed his things slower than usual. He waited until the room had mostly emptied out. But Bakugo was still there, leaning by the windowsill, arms crossed, his expression unreadable, at first. Then he walked over, face close. No laughter now. Just coldness. Bakugo, you're not just a loser, Deku. You're a Fing parasite. You cling to a dream that was never used to have. If you really want to be a hero, he looked out the window, tone flat. Bakugo, do the world a favor. Try jumping off the roof. Maybe in your next life, you'll be born with a quirk. Izuku couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it screamed. The throb in his chest drowned everything else. He couldn't cry. Couldn't even flinch. Just stood there, face blank, as Bakugo walked away without looking back. And when the last echo of footsteps faded, Izuku sat down in the now empty room, the corner of his hero analysis notebook clenched tight in his trembling fist. The words, "the application form," stared at him from the page like a cruel joke. For the first time, he truly wondered if maybe Bakugo was right. Flashback over that was the moment it truly hit me. It wasn't just about not having power. It was about the world deciding that, because of that, I didn't have worth. I walked home alone that day. Katsuki and his friends had already left, still mocking me behind my back, probably waiting to rough me up again. My notebooks were heavy in my bag, filled with notes I once thought might matter. But they didn't. Not anymore. Because all men aren't born equal. That was the harsh truth I learned too early. Some are born with power. Some with influence. Some with nothing at all. And while we're all told to chase our dreams, only a few are given the tools to reach them. The rest of us, we're left to watch, to wish, to wonder why we were born broken. But even then, even with all of that pressing down on me like a weight I couldn't shake, I still wanted to be a hero. Not because I thought I could win, but because I believed someone needed to try. Time skip Inko, what is this? My mother spoke. I remember the words because they didn't feel like hers. They came out of her mouth, sure, but they didn't carry any of the warmth a parent's voice should have. They were cold, sharp, like glass breaking beneath bare feet. I had just gotten home, the smell of dust and old clothes still clinging to me from my part-time job at that tiny thrift store down the road. The owner was kind enough, but he made it clear, no hero nonsense, kid. Just stack the boxes and don't break anything. It was the only place that would hire someone like me, quirkless, 16, and desperate. The house was dark when I stepped in. It always was. She kept the curtains drawn, said the sun gave her migraines. The lights barely worked half the time, and the smell of instant noodles had become a permanent fixture in the air. I took off my shoes and headed toward my room like I always did. Quiet. Invisible. That's how I moved around the house now. Years of practice. But she was waiting. She stood outside my door, and in her hands, she held it. My UA registration slip. Crumpled now. Wrinkled like it had been clutched tightly, like she wanted to crush it but hadn't quite found the strength. What is this? She said again. Her voice didn't shake. That's what scared me most. It was calm. Detached. Like someone reading instructions on a bottle of cleaning detergent. I didn't answer at first. I couldn't. My heart pounded so hard it echoed in my ears. Inko, I asked you a question, Izuku. What is this? I swallowed. Izuku. It's my application to UA. Why? That was the only word she said for almost a full minute. But not how. Not when. Just why. I looked at her, and for the first time in a while, I really looked. She was thinner than she used to be, her hair tied back lazily, her eyes dull like the light had gone out a long time ago. She used to smile. Used to call me her little all might. That felt like a lifetime ago. Izuku, I want to be a hero, I said. She laughed. Quietly. Not from amusement. The kind of laugh that's closer to a sigh. Closer to disbelief. Inko. A hero. Haven't you grown out of that yet? I opened my mouth, but she cut me off. Inko, you're quirkless, Izuku. Quirkless. How many times do I have to say it before you understand? You think UA will accept someone like you. You think this world has a place for people like you. Wake up. This isn't a comic book. I tried to speak again, but my voice felt small. Izuku, I know I don't have a quirk. But I've studied. I've trained. I've learned so much. I studied, she scoffed. Inko, you think memorizing facts makes you a hero. You think working part-time at some junk store and playing dress-up with notebooks makes you worthy of UA. Get real, Izuku. You're a child pretending to be something you're not. I clenched my fists. Izuku, had to get that job because you wouldn't help me. I had to learn how to cook because you stopped making food. I had to patch my own clothes, fix the heater when it broke, buy my own school supplies. You gave up on me the moment the doctor said I didn't have a quirk. Inko, don't you dare blame me for this too, she snapped. Her voice raised now, sharp and venomous. Inko, do you think it was easy for me? Watching all the other mothers brag about their kids while mine sat silent. Watching you get hurt, get laughed at, get pushed around every day. I couldn't protect you. I couldn't change anything. So I chose to step back. I chose to stop pretending. Because it hurt too much to hope. When I took a step back, her words landed like punches. Izuku, so what? You decided to stop being a mother too. I asked. She looked at me and for a moment, something flashed in her eyes. Regret. Shame. I'll never know. It was gone too fast. Inko, you have no idea what it's like, she whispered. Inko, to watch your child chase a dream that will never come true. Izuku, and you have no idea what it's like, I said quietly, to be that child. To wake up every day in a house that feels colder than the outside. To go to school and be reminded you're less than everyone else. To come home and not even be looked at. To work hours. Just to afford a notebook or a meal while your mother turns her back on you. I never asked for a quirk. I just wanted you to believe in me. Once she didn't answer. Silence hung between us like a wall. Heavy. Solid. Izuku, just rip it up if you want, I said, nodding toward the registration slip. Izuku, burn it. Throw it away. But I'm still going. Even if I have to crawl through the gates, I'll make it there. I'm not giving up, even if you already have. She looked down at the paper in her hands, then back at me. Inko, you'll die chasing that dream, she said flatly. Izuku, then I'll die trying, I replied. Plus I walked past her into my room and shut the door behind me. The air inside felt thicker than before. I sat down at my desk, opened my notebook, and stared at the blank page. My hands shook. My eyes burned. But I didn't cry. I was past that. I was just heading home from school. Another day, another reminder. Same jeers, same whispers, same Dim notebook thrown out the window. The teacher had praised Bakugo again. Big surprise. Top of the class, strongest quirk, future #1. I was the footnote, if that. Just the weird quirkless kid scribbling in his hero fanboy diary. They didn't even call me by name anymore. Just laughed when I picked my book up off the floor and muttered thanks to nobody. The sun was still out, but it felt dim. It always did when I walked alone like this, head down, hands in my pockets. The city buzzed with life, heroes swooping through the sky, sirens in the distance, crowds cheering somewhere far off. It was like a world I could see but never touch. A glass barrier I couldn't break no matter how hard I pounded on it. I had just passed under the overpass when I heard the splash. At first, I thought it was a busted pipe. But then the smell hit me, rotten sewage and something. Alive. Then I saw it. A mass of slime, thick and churning, bubbling like it had a heartbeat. Before I could react, it lunged. It had eyes. A face, grinning like it had already won. Thanks for the body, kid. It snarled, voice gurgling through its ooze. I didn't even scream. My body froze. It wrapped around me, tight, suffocating. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I thought, no, I knew I was going to die right there. No quirk. No strength. No chance. Then, boom, wind pressure slammed into everything around us. The slime burst apart like it had been hit by a truck made of air. I collapsed to my knees, gasping, coughing, slime dripping from my uniform. "Fear not, for I am here," came the voice. I looked up. It was him. 𝗏𝗏, the symbol of peace. The man who saved the world more times than I could count. The reason I still had dreams in the first place. And he was smiling. Right at me. He scooped the villain into bottles, laughed, patted my shoulder, and just like that, everything felt okay again. He was about to leap off when I stammered 𝗧𝗵𝗲. Wait please. I grabbed his leg just as he jumped. The wind tore past my face. We landed on a rooftop, and I collapsed again, still wheezing. He looked at me, confused but not angry. I have so many questions. I gasped out. He held up a hand, his eyes scanning me carefully. "Make it quick, young man. Time is not on my side today." I hesitated. My mouth went dry. But I had to say it. "Izuku, can someone like me be a hero too?" He blinked. "𝗏𝗏, what do you mean?" "Izuku, I mean I don't have a quirk. But I want to be like you. I want to save people with a smile. I want to be the kind of hero that makes people feel safe just by showing up. I know I'm not strong or fast or special, but if I train hard enough, if I work harder than anyone else, could I still be a hero?" For a second he didn't answer. He just looked at me. His face was unreadable. Then he sighed and turned away. "𝗏𝗏, I'm sorry, kid," he said quietly. "𝗏𝗏, being a hero. It's not just about longing. Without a quirk, you're putting your life, and others, at risk. You need power. Reality is cruel. Some dreams just aren't meant to come true." I stood there, frozen. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. But all I could do was stare at the man I had idolized my entire life as he walked away. And just like that, the last thread holding my dream together snapped. Time skip. I was currently standing on top of a tall building in an old industrial area near Mustafu. It was the kind of place most people didn't bother visiting anymore. The wind carried the scent of rust and oil, and the air was heavy with silence, except for the occasional distant train horn or the soft humming of electrical wires. This building, this forgotten rooftop, it felt like the edge of the world. I had quit my job at that thrift store. It didn't matter anymore. None of it did. That place was just another reminder of where I belonged in this world. At the bottom. Stocking shelves filled with garbage nobody wanted. Being spoken to like I was less than nothing. Getting paid just enough to eat and go home to a place that didn't feel like home. A place where the person who raised me couldn't even look me in the eye. She was right. My mom. She always said I was wasting my time. That dreaming of becoming a hero would only lead to disappointment. I didn't want to believe her, not at first. I told myself she was just scared, just worried for me. But when I came home that day with the UA registration slip and she looked at me like I had gone insane, I finally started to understand. 𝗏𝗏 said it too. The man I looked up to my entire life. The one I idolized. The one who saved people with a smile, no matter what. He told me to stop dreaming. That a quirkless boy couldn't be a hero. He looked me in the eyes and said it. No hesitation. No comfort. Just the truth. Cold. Plain. Final. So, she was right. My mom was right. 𝗏𝗃𝗲 was right. Society was right. Being quirkless wasn't just some minor inconvenience. It wasn't a hurdle. It was a full stop. A dead end. A label that marked me as useless. Powerless. Hopeless. Being quirkless is just another word for being nothing. Why was I such an idiot for not seeing it sooner? Why did I keep holding on to hope? Why did I let myself believe that effort mattered more than power? That I could be the exception in a world that was built to leave people like me behind? Why did I have to be so delusional? Even 𝗏𝗏, even he couldn't pretend for my sake. Even he had to knock some sense into me. And the worst part, I thanked him for it. I actually smiled through the tears and said thank you like a fool. Because a part of me was still clinging to whatever little validation I could get from him. Even if it was just a pat on the head and a few crushing words. I was truly an idiot. So maybe 𝗏𝗃𝗲 was right. Maybe I should just follow his advice. He said it all the time, didn't he? If I wanted to be a hero so badly, maybe I should just jump off a roof and hope I got a quirk in my next life. He laughed when he said it. Everyone laughed. And I laughed too. I always laughed. Like it was just a joke. Like it didn't eat away at me every time. But it's not a joke now. I stood at the edge, eyes looking down at the broken concrete below. I wondered how long it would take. If it would hurt. If anyone would care. Maybe I'd be a passing headline. Maybe no one would even find me. Maybe they'd just assume I was a quirkless loser who couldn't handle it anymore and moved on with their lives. I closed my eyes. I let the wind brush against my face. It was cold. A little sharp. I imagined it pulling me forward, as if the world itself was trying to say, it's time. I took a step forward. And then, nothing. Not falling. Not flying. Just floating. I opened my eyes. I was hovering. Just a few inches off the ground. What the hell? I blinked. Looked down. My feet weren't touching anything. There was no ledge beneath me. No trick of the light. I was suspended in the air, like the wind had caught me and refused to let me go. What the hell? My arms trembled. My breath caught in my throat. I tried to move, and my body responded. Slowly. Gently. I drifted back, then forward again. I was in control. Somehow, I was doing this. My body, it felt lighter than air but grounded at the same time. Like something inside me had finally awakened. Tears spilled from my eyes. I had a quirk. I actually had a quirk. I fell to my knees as soon as I landed back on the rooftop. My hands trembled against the gravel and steel. I laughed. Choked. All at once. All this time. I wasn't broken. I wasn't useless. I wasn't nothing. Something was inside me. Something real. Something mine. Izuku, I have a quirk. I whispered. Then louder. Izuku, I have a quirk. The world didn't stop. The sky didn't crack open. No cheering crowd or hero anthem played. But something had changed. Inside me. And for the first time in years, maybe ever. I felt alive. I sat down, knees still trembling a little from the rush of what just happened. My thoughts were all over the place, like my brain couldn't keep up with everything I was feeling. So all it took was a near-death experience. That's what it took to force my body to activate whatever this was. All this time, nothing. Years of ridicule, abuse, silence, and despair. But now, after finally giving up, after standing on the edge of nothingness, my body decided to wake up. I closed my eyes and tried to remember the feeling. That moment when I stepped forward. That sensation of something inside me snapping open like a SW's being flipped, like a dam breaking and flooding my entire system. I stood up and jumped. Nothing crazy, just a hop, and again I floated. Not as high this time, but still off the ground, weightless, like gravity had stopped caring about me. I took a deep breath and steadied myself, the air sharp and cool in my lungs. To think, the quirk I awakened was kind of similar to hers. That woman who calls herself my mother. She can float things, right? But this felt different. More intense. More dangerous. At least it's better than nothing, right? Maybe I could actually do something with this. Maybe I could, wait, what if there was more to it? That thought, it wouldn't let go. What if this floating was just the beginning? What if I hadn't even scratched the surface? I didn't know what I was doing, not really. I was just following instincts, raw and untrained. But still, something in me felt different. No, not just different, strange. Like every single cell in my body had been stirred awake after a lifetime of slumber. Like this energy, no, this force had been buried inside me all along, and now it was bursting through every inch of me. I couldn't contain it. I couldn't explain it. But I could feel it. I felt like I could take on the whole world. Across the rooftop, I saw a rusted metal beam, thick and long, something that looked like it had fallen during some old construction work and never got picked up. I walked over, heart pounding, muscles buzzing, and I grabbed it with both hands. It felt light. Not just lighter than it should be, light like a toy. Like it was made of hollow plastic instead of steel. My grip tightened, almost on instinct, and the metal groaned. I blinked. Bent it. Not with effort. Not with strain. I just bent it. Like I had always been able to. Like it was nothing. What's going on? Float, and now super strength. Izuku, what's happening to me? My knees buckled. I collapsed. It hit me like a truck. Pain, sharp, deep, overwhelming pain, ripped through my head like knives digging into my brain. I screamed, clutching my skull, eyes wide, heart slamming against my ribs like it was trying to escape my chest. I could hear everything. A baby crying somewhere blocks away. A microwave beeping in someone's apartment. Footsteps. Breathing. A car engine struggling to start. Muffled conversations from inside buildings I couldn't even see. I could see everything. My vision flickered uncontrollably, like someone kept flipping through filters. First, everything turned red and blue, the outlines of heat radiating off every surface, off every living being. Then it shifted again. I saw through things. Through walls. Through beams and bricks and glass and people. Layers peeled away like they weren't even there. It hurts. It hurts. It hurts. I screamed again, voice hoarse, vision going white from the overload. The wind rushed around me, and I couldn't tell if I was shaking or if the whole world was. My heartbeat was like thunder in my ears. My lungs struggled to keep up. My fingers dug into the gravel of the rooftop, gripping it like it was the only real thing left. 𝗧𝗪𝗧𝗪𝗧, make it stop, please, make it stop. I didn't understand any of it. I didn't even know what to call this. Was this a quirk? Was this a combination of powers? Float, strength, enhanced senses. And not just enhanced, these were beyond anything a normal person should feel. This was too much. It was like my body had gone from 0 to 100 in seconds. Years of nothing, and now I was being force-fed the abilities of multiple people all at once. Tears spilled again, unrelenting, but not from sadness this time. From fear. From awe. From confusion. From pain. I had a quirk. But what the hell was it? And why did it feel like it was killing me and saving me at the same time? I sat on the rooftop of an abandoned warehouse, a cracked notebook open on my lap, the pages half filled with messy notes, diagrams, and ideas that barely made sense to me at first glance. 3 weeks. It had been 3 weeks since that night, since I hovered over the edge and everything changed. Since I first thought I was going to die. And instead woke up to a new truth. My quirk, I said aloud to myself, letting the words settle in the air like they were still foreign. Solar core. It sounded ridiculous at first, like something out of an old comic. But every test, every experiment, every painful trial and error over these weeks kept pointing back to the same conclusion. My body. It wasn't just some random anomaly. It wasn't a glitch or a mistake. It was something purposeful, something reactive, like it had been waiting for the right spark to come alive. I stood and faced the rising sun, letting its warmth wash over me. As the light touched my skin, I could feel it. A hum. A low vibration just beneath the surface, like every cell in my body was taking a deep breath. It was like my pores opened, not just to sweat or breathe, but to drink in the sun. My arms tingled. My spine straightened. The fatigue I'd felt from training the night before slowly faded away as if I had just woken from the best sleep of my life. Every time the sun touches me, it's like my cells go into overdrive. Like they're eating the light and breaking it down, not just for energy, but for fuel. Pure power. Like I've got solar panels under my skin, absorbing and storing sunlight into my body's core. I clenched my fist and jumped off the edge, landing a few stories down with a loud thud that cracked the concrete. Not even a sting. I stood up straight and rolled my shoulders. Super strength. Definitely getting there. I took off in a blur across the rooftop, skidding to a stop and accidentally crashing into a rusted pipe. It bent like paper and I winced. Still working on the brakes. My hearing had improved too. I could hear a man cursing at his coffee machine 3 blocks away, a kid bouncing a ball down an alley, a dog barking in frustration at a squirrel just out of reach. Every sound layered on top of each other like an orchestra of chaos. But with practice, I'd started to filter them out. My brain was learning to separate noise from signal, to focus in ways it never could before. I looked up and blinked. My eyes zoomed in automatically on a hawk gliding high above, the details of its feathers crystal clear, the muscles in its wings flexing with each motion. A few seconds later, the lenses in my eyes shifted. I could see the warm trail it left behind in the air, infrared heat, maybe. Then X-ray. Then normal. My vision still jumped on its own sometimes, but I was starting to control it, inch by inch. And flight. I sighed, glancing at the dented metal water tank on the far end of the rooftop. That one still SCKS. It was less like flying and more like being launched from a slingshot I couldn't control. I would will myself up, shoot into the air like a cannonball, and then smash through whatever unfortunate object stood in my path. Last week, I crashed into a billboard and nearly fell into the street below. 2 days ago, I broke through a 5th-story wall and scared a bunch of pigeons half to death. All right, let's try again. I backed up, focused on that feeling, on the energy in my chest, the light still dancing through my veins. I crouched, launched up, and hovered. For a second. Maybe 2. Then I wobbled like a drunk bee and rocketed forward. No. I smashed through an old rusted pipe, bounced off a broken ventilation, and finally landed in a pile of crates with a loud crash. Wood splinters flew everywhere. I coughed, rubbing the back of my head. Still if he's... But I was smiling. I couldn't help it. I stood again, brushing off debris, and walked back to my notebook. The pages had started to fill with data. Observations. Sunlight absorbed per hour. Maximum output duration. Even a section labeled solar overload symptoms where I tracked what happened when I took in too much light and nearly blacked out from the rush of power. I'm still figuring it all out, I said to myself, writing down today's notes. But I know this. I'm not nothing. I'm not quirkless. I'm not broken. I looked at my hands, hands that once felt powerless, useless. Now they felt like they could move mountains. And I'm going to master this. All of it. Even the flight. I closed my notebook and stood again, squinting into the sunrise. They were all wrong. Every single one of them. My mom. 𝗵𝗃𝗀. Even All Might. I inhaled deeply, letting the sun pour into me. This is just the beginning. Several hours later in Izuku's home, I was folding the last of my clothes into a duffel bag when I heard her voice behind me. Inko, what are you doing? I didn't turn around at first. I kept packing, slowly, deliberately, not saying anything. I figured maybe she'd go away if I ignored her long enough. But she didn't. She stood there in the doorway, arms crossed, her usual scowl already forming on her face. The room was quiet for a moment, too quiet. I could feel her eyes on me, scanning me like I was a stranger. Maybe I was. Maybe that's what I'd become to her. Maybe that's what I'd always been. Izuku, I'm moving out, I finally said, zipping the bag shut. Izuku, I found a place not too far from Mustafu. Small quite. Enough for me. She stepped into the room slowly, looking around like it was the first time she'd noticed how empty it was. Most of the shelves were bare. The posters were gone. My All Might figurines, once lined up neatly by the window, were gone too. Inko, you're just leaving. I turned to face her. She looked older than I remembered. Maybe more tired. But I wasn't going to let that change my decision. Yeah, I said. Izuku, I already paid the first 3 months. Used the money from selling all that stuff you used to complain about. She blinked at that, and for a second, it looked like she didn't know what to say. Inko, you're not even going to explain. Not even going to say why. Why? I repeated, almost laughing. Izuku, what do you want me to say? That I'm tired of being treated like a burden. That for years you barely looked at me unless it was to remind me what I didn't have. Or how I ruined your life. I'm not staying here just to be your emotional punching bag anymore. Her mouth opened like she was going to say something, but nothing came out. Izuku, you never believed in me. Not once. You said I was pathetic, weak, useless. You looked at me like I was some broken thing you were forced to live with. Do you even remember my last birthday? No, of course you don't. Because you were passed out on the couch. Her eyes narrowed. Inko, watch your tone, Izuku. Izuku, why? You never cared about my tone before. You only care now because I'm finally doing something for myself. She took a step forward, and her eyes did a quick scan over me again. I saw the confusion there. The uncertainty. I looked different, taller, sharper. My skin had color now. My eyes had light. The bones that used to show through my skin were now covered in lean, coiled muscle. "Inko, you've changed," she said quietly. "Inko, you don't look like you used to." "𝗲𝗏𝗧𝗵𝗲, I'm not who I used to be," I replied. "𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗵𝗲, I'm stronger now. Smarter. I have a plan. I'm not chasing anyone's dream anymore. Not All Might's. Not society's. Inko, you're not even going to tell me how." "𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏, it doesn't matter," I said. "𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏, what matters is that I don't need to live here and keep pretending that I'm okay with how things are." She looked at me hard, then over at the empty shelves, the packed bags, the faded shadow of a poster that used to hang above my bed. "Inko, so that's it. You're just leaving. Just like that?" I nodded. "𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏, I have to. I stayed here too long already. I stayed hoping things would get better. But they won't. You won't. And I can't waste any more time." She sat down slowly on the edge of the bed, the same bed I'd cried in for years, the same mattress that sagged from nights I stayed awake wondering why I wasn't enough. I saw something flicker across her face, but I didn't stop to comfort her. "Not this time. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏, I'm not going to be a hero the way people expect," I said, picking up my bag. "𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏, but I'll still help people. I'll still make a difference. Just not by being what they want me to be." She didn't say anything. "𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏, I don't need your permission. I don't need your approval. I just needed to know I could survive without either. And now I know I can." She looked up then, her eyes dull but focused. "Inko, so you're really done with all of it?" "𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏, with pretending." "Yeah. I sold everything. All Might stuff. All gone. Got a good price for it too. Guess worshipping someone doesn't pay off unless you turn it into profit." She flinched at the sarcasm in my voice, but I didn't feel bad. "Not anymore. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏, I'm going to be late," I said, slinging the duffel over my shoulder. "𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏, I've got a lot to do. Training. Figuring out how far this quirk of mine goes. I might not know everything yet, but at least I know who I am now." Her eyes widened. "Inko, have a quirk?" I nodded. "𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏, turns out I was just a late bloomer." Her voice was small when she spoke next. "Inko, you could have told me." I stopped at the door and turned back. "𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏, told you what? That I have a quirk now. That I almost committed suicide before it awakened. That everything I am now, I had to become alone. You wouldn't have listened. You never listened." Silence again. "Goodbye, Mom." I walked out and didn't look back. I adjusted the strap on my duffel bag as I stepped out onto the cracked pavement, the gate creaking behind me with a kind of finality I didn't expect. The sky above was gray, the kind of gray that weighed on your shoulders, but for once, I didn't feel heavy. I felt light. Not because I was happy, I wasn't, but because the weight I'd carried for years, that invisible pressure of being unwanted, unnoticed, unloved, it was gone. Or maybe I had just stopped caring. I held my luggage close, the wheels thudding quietly on the uneven sidewalk as I walked away from the place I had once called home. The building loomed behind me like some faded monument to everything I used to be. Forgotten. That was the old me. That place held the ghosts of 1,000 nights I'd spent crying into my pillow, of sitting alone in the dark with the glow of my All Might posters to remind me there was still hope. Funny how even that hope had started to rot. Why did I say goodbye? The words echoed in my head. A soft, almost reluctant whisper I hadn't meant to say. It made it sound like I cared. Like part of me still wanted something from that house. From her. From the life I was leaving behind. But I didn't. I didn't need her guilt. I didn't need her late-night apologies that never came. I didn't need her reminders of how broken I was, how much of a burden I had been. And I sure as hell didn't need her pity now that something had finally changed. 8 more months. That's all I had left until the UA entrance exam. 8 months to become someone worthy of the path I was carving. I had to get serious. Books, lots of them. Not just hero stuff, but biology, physics, engineering. If my quirk was solar-based, I needed to understand it inside and out. And I couldn't just rely on powers alone. No real hero did. I needed to train my body, my reflexes, my mind. I needed to learn how to fight. Hand-to-hand combat was non-negotiable. I couldn't be flailing around in the middle of a fight just because I got too used to flying or hitting things with raw power. Power without control was just destruction. I wasn't looking to be another explosion-loving maniac like 𝗵𝗃𝗀𝗀. I wanted precision, strategy, purpose. One I'd have to look for a gym that didn't ask too many questions. One of those quiet, out-of-the-way places where the only rule was show up and shut up. Maybe I could find an old martial artist or a retired pro hero turn coach. Someone who wouldn't care that I didn't have a recommendation letter or some prestigious legacy to flaunt. Someone who saw the fire and not the family name. I glanced down at my phone. The battery was low, but the map still worked. My new apartment was about a 40-minute walk from here. Not bad. I could make a stop on the way and grab something to eat. The fridge in the new place was probably empty, and I didn't want to start my first night there on an empty stomach. A small store caught my eye across the street. I started heading toward it, but then I felt something cold hit my face. Then another. I paused. Droplets. Tiny, scattered at first, then slowly building. I looked up as the first gentle waves of rain began to fall from the gray sky above. It's raining. Of course it is. I didn't even bother pulling out the cheap umbrella tucked in the side of my bag. What was the point? I stood there on the sidewalk as the rain came down, not harsh, not loud, just steady. Persistent. It soaked into my hoodie, darkening the fabric, dripping down my arms and into my sleeves. My hair flattened, water tracing cold lines down the back of my neck. But I didn't move. I just stood there, watching the people hurry past with umbrellas, ducking under awnings, shielding themselves from the downpour like it was some curse. But I welcomed it. Maybe I needed it. Maybe the rain was the only thing that didn't expect anything from me. It didn't ask questions. It didn't judge. It just felt. And in a weird way, it felt like it was washing something off of me. All those years of self-hate. All the moments I told myself I wasn't good enough. All the nights I begged for a quirk, cried until my throat was raw, until my voice disappeared. Maybe the rain couldn't erase all that, but maybe it could dull the edges. I took a slow breath and let my eyelids flutter shut. I imagined the solar energy in my cells, flickering like tiny suns just under the surface. They were still there, still glowing even without the light. I could feel it in my bones, in my muscles, in the way my body didn't shiver, even though the rain was cold. I was different now. I stepped into the store, water dripping onto the tile as the bell above the door jingled softly. The clerk glanced up, then went back to his magazine. He didn't ask why I looked like I just stepped out of a storm. He didn't care. But I liked that. I picked up some instant noodles, rice, canned curry, and a few bottles of water. Nothing fancy. Just enough to get me through the next few days while I figured things out. I added some protein bars to the pile. I had to keep my energy levels up if I was going to train like my life depended on it. Because it did. I paid, tucked the groceries into my bag, and stepped back into the rain. It hadn't let up. If anything, it had gotten heavier. But I still didn't open the umbrella. Plus, I walked through the storm like it wasn't even there. I stood in front of the massive gates of 𝐒𝐻𝐢, a high school, the symbol of heroism, the starting line for the greatest journey in my life. After all those months of training, isolation, sweat, and discovering the full potential of my quirk, I had finally made it. My hands rested in my pockets, calm and steady. The wind rustled through my hair. I didn't feel nervous or anxious. Not anymore. The burning longing that once used to eat away at me had transformed into something clear, focused. I walked through the entrance, joining the crowd of applicants. Dozens of kids, all radiating potential and ambition, stood clustered across the massive courtyard. Some were stretching, others talking excitedly about their quirks or analyzing the school building with narrowed eyes. I spotted a few already sizing each other up like rivals. Then it happened. A light thud against my shoulder. Sorry about that. A voice called out. I turned and met eyes with a girl. She was about my age, with a round face, pink cheeks, and short brown hair that curled slightly at the ends. She blinked quickly, her eyes lingering on mine for a second too long before she looked away, cheeks reddening. 𝗧𝗍𝗂, no worries, I said with a calm smile. 𝗧𝗍𝗂, you all right? She nodded quickly. Yeah. I just got a little carried away. I was trying to stay relaxed, but I guess I ended up speeding up. Her eyes darted back up to me briefly and then looked away again. She took a small step back, fidgeting a little. One 𝗧𝗵𝗲, 𝗧𝗵𝗲, by the way, she added. 𝗧𝗵𝗲, good luck today. You too, I replied, nodding once. She quickly scurried off toward the gathering crowd. I didn't miss the small glance she threw over her shoulder before facing forward again. I moved to the center of the courtyard with the other examinees. The huge screen above flickered to life, drawing everyone's attention. Suddenly, the booming voice of 𝗵𝗃𝗵𝗲 exploded from the speakers. Yeah. Welcome, examinees, to the greatest high school in Japan. Hi. He struck a dramatic pose on screen, sunglasses glinting. His animated movements and loud tone jolted some of the applicants. Everybody say it. Why? Silence. He cleared his throat. 𝗵𝗃𝗵𝗲, okay, tough crowd. Let's get started with the orientation. Yeah. The screen switched to a virtual layout of the testing zones. 𝗵𝗃𝗵𝗲, you've all been assigned to one of the test sites labeled A through G. You'll be taking part in a 10-minute mock battle in a replica urban setting. Each site is its own battlefield. But listen up, there's no point in bringing your friends. Each applicant fights for themselves. He winked at the camera. 𝗵𝗃𝗵𝗲, you're all going to be taking out fake villains for points, or? Here's the breakdown. There are 3 types of robots: 1-pointers, 2-pointers, and 3-pointers. They're all scattered around the field. Your job: smash, crash, and blast your way through them to earn as many points as possible. Everyone leaned forward as images of the robots popped up on screen. But watch out. There's also a 4th type, the 0-pointer. A massive robot towered over a building in the visual simulation, crushing pavement with each step. 𝗵𝗃𝗵𝗲, this bad boy. Not worth any points and a total waste of your time. Consider it an obstacle. Best advice. Laughter erupted from the speakers. I felt someone step next to me. I glanced sideways to see a guy with glasses adjusting his frames. He looked precise, like someone who had memorized every rule in the book. The boy suddenly raised his hand. Yes, you there. Go on. 𝗵𝗃𝗵𝗲 called out. The boy with glasses, 𝗃𝗫𝗫, spoke sharply. Sir, there appears to be a misprint on the handout. It states there are 4 types of villains, but your explanation only covers 3. Would you clarify this discrepancy? One 𝗵𝗃𝗵𝗲 leaned into the camera with a smirk. 𝗵𝗃𝗵𝗲, oh, well, thanks for pointing that out. But nah, ain't no misprint, my uptight friend. The 0-pointer's real, it just doesn't earn ya any points. Keep your eyes open. He frowned deeply but said nothing more. I watched him for a moment. He didn't seem like a bad guy, just a little too intense. I was used to being surrounded by people like Bakugo. This guy was nothing in comparison. I tuned back in as 𝗵𝗃𝗵𝗲 continued. 𝗵𝗃𝗵𝗲, you all got 10 minutes in the battle zone. The more robots you take down, the more points you get. But remember, it ain't just about power. Judges will be watching for judgment, movement, decision-making, and valor. Heroes gotta have brains and heart, you dig. The screen cut off and the staff began guiding us to our respective testing zones. I walked calmly, my nerves completely under control. The sun was high, and I could already feel the warmth sinking into my skin. It fueled me gently, like an engine purring quietly inside. I didn't need to warm up. I was ready. We lined up in front of the massive gate of Test Site B. The gate was huge, looking more like the entrance to a theme park than a battlefield. The atmosphere was heavy. Everyone around me was stretching, bracing themselves, some muttering strategies under their breath. I just stood still, breathing evenly. From nearby, I could feel eyes on me again. Uraraka was a few meters away. She smiled nervously when our gazes met. I nodded once, giving her a reassuring look. She looked relieved. That same guy who was right behind me suddenly stepped up. You over there, he said firmly. You've been glaring at that girl since we lined up. That's highly disrespectful behavior, especially here at UE. You need to. For Izuku, I wasn't glaring, I cut in calmly. Izuku, we bumped into each other earlier, that's all. He blinked, thrown off by my tone. "Oh, I see. My apologies then. I misunderstood your expression. No harm done." He adjusted his glasses again and stepped back into line. Then came the countdown. The gates began to rumble, gears grinding and hissing as the doors to the testing grounds began to open. The artificial city stretched across the massive battlefield, metal towers, fake roads, and scattered alleys making up a detailed replica of an urban war zone. Students, current and future heroes, lined up along the launch area. Some of them were stretching, others checking their gear. A few even had mechanical attachments or support equipment specially designed to enhance their quirks. I hovered just above the ground in a simple black tracksuit. No armor. No gadgets. No weapons. Just me. It didn't bother me. I didn't need any of that. Still, a part of me couldn't help but wonder just how much money this school had to throw around to create something this massive, just for an entrance exam. But now wasn't the time to be thinking about funding. I activated my X-ray vision and scanned the area ahead. I immediately picked up on two hulking masses moving beyond the far buildings, 2 0-pointers. Giant machines with no point value. Just distractions, hazards meant to terrify. I stored the info in the back of my mind. Present Mick's voice exploded once more from the speakers. "Go, go, go. What are you waiting for? There's no such thing as a starting gun in real life." Without hesitation, I rose higher into the air, positioning myself above the swarm of examinees who rushed forward on foot. The wind howled past me and in an instant, boom. I shattered the sound barrier, a thunderclap echoing across the battlefield as I launched myself forward like a missile. My body cut through the air, pressure waves trailing behind me. I zeroed in on a cluster of 2-pointers charging out of a side street, their mechanical claws clanking against the pavement. I crashed straight through the first one, my fist demolishing its core in an instant. Its metal body crumpled like paper. I didn't slow down. I swerved mid-flight and slammed my foot into the second one, turning it into scrap. Pieces flew everywhere. Another spun toward me with spinning saw blades out. I spiraled upward, let it lunge, then dropped like a meteor and slammed both fists into it from above. The machine exploded into a cloud of parts. In the distance, I spotted Uraraka. She was using her quirk to make chunks of debris float. She released them with a clap, sending them plummeting down onto several 1-pointers with perfect timing. She moved nimbly, taking cover between alleyways and using her environment like a veteran. I kept going, blurring around the city as I cleared path after path. 1-pointers, 2-pointers, 3-pointers, none of them stood a chance. I didn't just destroy them. I flew through them. Sometimes I didn't even have to strike. The shockwave of my passage was enough to crush them or send them toppling into buildings. I kept count in my head, analyzing every successful takedown, scanning the scoreboard system through my supervision. 2 1-pointers, another 3-pointer, 4 2-pointers in that block. By the time I finished circling the west sector of the arena, I had already accumulated over 120 points. And that was just from direct robot eliminations. But I actually thought it would be difficult, I said with a quiet sigh, still floating mid-air. I hovered casually, breathing evenly. Then my ears twitched. A grinding roar in the distance. A crash of debris. The screech of twisting metal. Someone was in trouble. With a flash, I was gone. I reappeared above a side street just in time to see a massive 3-pointer collapsing forward, smoke trailing from its ruined core. Beneath it, a girl was frozen in fear. She had green hair, black eyes, and a long frog-like tongue sticking out in panic. Clearly a frog-type quirk user. Her body was built for agility, but she wasn't fast enough to move from underneath the descending wreckage. I shot downward and caught the robot's remains with one hand before it could touch her. "Izuku, are you okay?" I asked, looking down at her. She stared at me with a shocked expression. "Isn't that too heavy?" she asked. "Nope," I replied casually. I lifted the entire hulk of the 3-pointer with one arm and flung it sideways like it was weightless. It crashed harmlessly into a nearby wall. I smiled at her and said, "Sorry, gotta go." And just like that, I was gone again, vanishing into the sky. With a sweep of my vision, I caught sight of the engine-legged student from earlier, 𝗧𝗧, blasting through alleyways, navigating with precision, taking out targets with focused kicks. He was efficient and skilled. Not bad. But then everything changed. The ground shook. A massive shadow loomed over the battlefield. Screams erupted. The zero-pointer entered the arena. It was a mountain of metal, dozens of meters tall. Its footsteps made the entire battlefield tremble. Its single glowing eye scanned the area, targeting nothing but intimidating everything. I turned toward it slowly. Most of the students fled in terror. Ida boosted himself away. Support gear users scattered. Even the bravest examinees knew to avoid it. No points. No value. Just risk. That's when I saw her. Uraraka was trapped beneath a pile of rubble. Her leg was pinned, her hand reaching outward. The zero-pointer's foot was lifting. It was coming down right on her. Without a second thought, I moved. In the span of a blink, I appeared between her and the massive foot. Everyone watching thought the same thing. Too late. But I didn't dodge. I caught it. The zero-pointer's colossal foot descended and stopped. Held in place by a single pair of arms. A shockwave blasted outward from the point of contact. Dust exploded in all directions. Cracks formed beneath my feet. The robot's titanic leg trembled. I stood firm, unmoving. My fingers dug into the metal. My head tilted upward, eyes locked on the face of the machine. "You're done," I said. I clenched my fist. And then I punched. The air itself seemed to rip apart as my fist collided with the robot's foot. The force rippled through the entire structure. A thunderclap echoed across the battlefield. The robot didn't just fall. It exploded. The entire zero-pointer detonated from within, its frame rupturing outward in a devastating shockwave. Its massive torso launched backward, twisting midair before crashing down outside the arena in a crumpled heap of destroyed steel. Nothing remained of its original structure. Not even a hand. It was annihilated. Silence. Everyone stared. Students. Judges. Pro-heroes. Floating above the rubble, I held Uraraka gently in my arms. "Izuku, you're safe now," I said softly, lowering her carefully to the ground. She stared at me, cheeks red, eyes wide with disbelief. I thank you," she managed to whisper. I smiled once. Then, just like before, I was gone. Inside the observation room of the high school, the air was thick with tension, anticipation, and rising disbelief. Monitors lined the walls, each one displaying different sectors of the massive testing arena. Teachers and staff members stood or sat, eyes glued to the screens as the practical exam played out in real time. Principal Nizu, perched comfortably in his chair with a steaming teacup in paw, observed the chaos below with calm curiosity. Present Mike leaned forward, voice unusually quiet. "Present Mike, man, they're going hard today. That one kid's practically kicking metal teeth in." Midnight twirled her pen with a lazy smile. "Midnight, some of them are promising. That girl with the gravity quirk, clean execution. Smart too. Oh, and that Ida boy from the engine family, he's precise. Efficient. Probably top 3 material." Aizawa stood silently behind them, arms crossed, scanning the various feeds with narrowed eyes. He didn't speak much during these evaluations. He preferred to observe. Then, suddenly, one of the monitors lit up with motion so fast it almost glitched. "Snipe, what the hell is that?" Snipe muttered, lowering his coffee slowly. "Snipe, was that a blur?" All eyes snapped to the monitor showing Sector C. The camera feed struggled to keep up. Someone, was zipping through the city landscape at hypersonic speeds. Robots were exploding in every direction. 2 pointers. 3 pointers. Gone. Torn apart. Not from fancy tools or coordinated teamwork. Just raw, overwhelming power. The blur halted midair, and the camera focused for a brief moment. A student in nothing but a simple black track suit hovered in place, arms folded, face calm. "𝗵𝗲𝗄, is he flying?" 𝗵𝗲𝗄 asked, stepping forward slightly. "𝗵𝗲𝗄, is that the support item?" "No," Power Loader replied, eyes squinting. "Power Loader, He's not wearing anything. No propulsion tech, no equipment. Nothing. That's just him. Minute. Wait, zoom in. Enhance that feed, Midnight said. The feed cleared for a second. There he was. A student with green hair, floating gently in midair as if it was the most natural thing in the world. Below him were piles of destroyed robots. Scrap metal and fire. All Might, standing off to the side in his thin, gaunt form, stared at the monitor in stunned silence. His mouth was slightly open, lips parted as if trying to form words that wouldn't come. Then he said, "That the boy." Nizu tilted his head. "Boy. All Might, the one who approached me once." "Yes, me." All Might trailed off, eyes still locked on the screen. "All Might. He asked me if a quirkless person could become a hero. I told him no. I told him to dream of something else." No one said anything for a moment. Aizawa's voice broke the silence. "What's his name?" He walked over to a nearby terminal, pulled up a file, and tapped the touchpad. A student profile appeared. Aizawa read it aloud. Midoriya Izuku. Age 15. Middle school, Aldra Junior High. Academic scores lower than average. Physical scores abysmal. Medical record shows repeated visits due to injuries sustained in what appear to be accidents but obviously bullying. Formerly labeled quirkless until recently. Quirk registered as Solar Core, passive solar energy absorption. That's it. There was silence. That's it. Power Loader said. Power Loader, no listed secondary effect. No description of what the energy does. None, Aizawa replied, frowning. Aizawa, it just says passive solar absorption. That's not a quirk. That's a battery with no output. Well, Midnight said, pointing at the screen. Midnight, it sure as hell has output now. Look, Present Mike pointed, voice growing louder with excitement. Present Mike. He just flew into that alley, look at the count. He's at over 130 points. That's just from combat. A second later, the room shook slightly as the camera feed zoomed in on the 0-pointer stomping through Sector D. Students ran screaming in every direction. One lingered behind, Uraraka, pinned under rubble. And there, in the middle of it all, came Midoriya again. He didn't hesitate. He didn't slow down. He caught the 0-pointer's foot. And then he punched it. The explosion that followed rocked every monitor in the room. The sound vibrated through the building, even through the soundproof walls. The 0-pointer, the gigantic machine meant only to intimidate, was destroyed. Obliterated in a single hit. There was nothing left but a crater. The room fell dead silent. No one moved. No one blinked. All Might swallowed hard, still staring. For 𝗵𝗲, that strength. That speed, the flight. That's not just solar absorption. That's not a weak late bloomer quirk, 𝗵𝗲 muttered. Midnight, why he hiding it? Midnight whispered. Midnight, why would someone with that kind of power pretend to be quirkless? One Aizawa, maybe he didn't know, Aizawa said. Aizawa, maybe it really was dormant. Something triggered it recently. One Nizu finally put his teacup down. Nizu, I want a full evaluation. BLD test, quirk analysis, everything, he said calmly. Nizu, if what we saw was real, and it certainly appears to be, this child has the potential to be more than a hero. He could be a cornerstone. Power Loader shook his head. Power Loader, forget top 10. He's top 1. Already. All Might took a deep breath. All Might, I told him he couldn't become a hero. I told him to give up. But that boy, he didn't listen. One Aizawa stared at the screen where Midoriya floated above the rubble, gently placing Uraraka down. His face was calm. Focused. Aizawa, because that boy was never going to ask for permission, plus he said. Aizawa, he was always going to become a hero. I walked with a plastic grocery bag in each hand, the soft crinkle of plastic mingling with the distant hum of evening traffic. The sun was dipping beneath the horizon, casting the streets in that soft orange glow that always made everything feel a little more cinematic than it had any right to. The bags were kind of heavy, but nothing I couldn't handle. One held a carton of eggs, 2 packets of ramen, a bottle of soy sauce, and a small package of marinated chicken thighs. The other had a bundle of green onions, a tub of miso paste, some tofu, and a couple cans of mikan juice. I figured I'd try making miso ramen tonight, the good kind. I'd earned it, right? One eye adjusted the weight in my arms, letting out a breath as I turned down a quieter street. The kind of road that was empty enough to let your thoughts scream. I hope Achiko and that frog girl were okay. I didn't get a chance to check on them after the exam. Everything happened so fast. 1 second I was flying through the air, tearing through robots. The next I was catching a falling zero-pointer's foot like it was a soccer ball. Then I crushed it. Crushed it. Like it was made of paper. I should have felt proud, but instead, I stared down at the sidewalk. What if I don't pass? 3. My stomach twisted a little. What if I caused too much damage? What if they deduct points for the robots I destroyed that weren't attacking anyone directly? Or because I went overboard? I didn't know the rules. What if I blew my chance because I got carried away? I shook my head and sighed. No, don't think like that. You did your best. You saved someone. Hell, you saved multiple people. You didn't hurt anyone. That has to count for something. That has to mean something. But the thoughts still gnawed at the back of my brain like rats in the walls. I wanted to be excited. I wanted to go home and look at myself in the mirror and say, "You did it, Izuku. You made it." But all I could think about was the silence waiting for me at my apartment. Normally, I'd be dying to share this with someone. To ramble about it, to break it down frame by frame and go full fanboy. But, my mom. I love her, I really do. But after the whole quirkless thing, I don't know. Something changed. She got quiet. Distant. Like every time she looked at me, she saw her own failure reflected back. She used to encourage me before abusing me emotionally. Used to believe in me. But now, well, I've basically disowned her. Bakugo. God no. That guy. He'd laugh in my face. Probably accuse me of copying someone else's quirk or faking it. He doesn't even know I have a quirk now. I didn't tell him. Not that I owe him anything. After everything he's done to me, years of bullying, pushing me around, calling me names, telling me to jump off a roof, why would I ever trust him with something like this? I stopped walking. When did I get so lonely? I stood there, 2 bags of groceries in hand, feeling the ache spread through my chest. Not the muscle kind. The other kind. The kind that hurts quietly. I've been training for months. Waking up early. Pushing myself past my limit. Eating bland food. Bleeding, sweating, crying alone. Always alone. I didn't have a training partner. No mentor. A kid with a dream and a body that kept trying to betray it. And now that the exam's over and the adrenaline's faded and there's no robots left to punch, I don't have anyone to celebrate with. No one to share this moment with. I started walking again, slower this time. My apartment was just a few blocks away. I passed by a group of kids from another school, laughing, probably heading home from cram school or something. Their voices were light. Their smiles easy. I tried not to stare. I don't have friends. One, it hit me like a cold breeze. Not in the dramatic, over-the-top way like in movies. Just simple. Quiet. I don't have anyone to text. No one waiting at home. No one wondering how I did today. No one who'll call me up just to ask if I'm okay or if I need company. No one. I turned the corner and reached the stairs leading to my apartment. I took each one slowly, one at a time, trying not to let the groceries swing too much. I got inside. Locked the door. Put the bags on the counter. The silence was deafening. I stood there in the middle of my tiny kitchen, staring at the food I bought like it didn't belong to me. I wanted to cook something amazing. Something worth remembering. But suddenly, I didn't feel like eating. I leaned against the counter, resting my head on my arm. I passed the test, right? I have to believe I did. But even if I do, who do I tell? Achiko flopped back first onto her futon with a huff, arms spread out like she just collapsed after a marathon. Her small apartment wasn't much. Bare walls, modest kitchen, a stack of textbooks in the corner, and a little cactus by the window that was clinging to life, but it was hers. The ceiling fan spun slowly above her, doing the bare minimum to keep the air moving. Her bag was discarded near the door, one shoe half off, the other still tied. She stared at the ceiling, her heart still racing, And not because of the exam. She let out a groan and threw her hands over her face. Ugh, hi, damn it, I forgot to ask him for his phone number. The words echoed in the silence of her apartment. Her cheeks were already warm again just thinking about him. That boy, the one in the tracksuit. The one who flew like a missile, who stopped that zero-pointer like it was nothing. The one she had bumped into at the entrance. The one with the messy green hair and soft eyes. What was his name again? Midoriya, she whispered. Izuku Midoriya. When it came out like a thought she wasn't ready to say aloud. She sat up and hugged her knees to her chest, still flushed. He was really handsome. Her voice was small. Confessional. Like she was sharing a secret with the walls. It wasn't just his face. Yeah, he was cute, but there was something about the way he moved. Like he didn't even realize how strong he was. And when he saved that girl, I think her name was Tsuyu or something, he just swooped in like it was nothing and caught that robot with one arm. She bit her lip, thinking back to the very beginning of the day. She had been so nervous. So tense. The pressure of the entrance exam weighed on her. Like a building was sitting on her shoulders. And then she saw him. Just standing there, looking just as nervous, holding back like he didn't belong. But then he started flying, she murmured. Like actually flying. For the image was burned into her brain. A blur of motion, a boom cracking through the air as he broke the sound barrier. Robots exploded behind him like fireworks. She'd been mid-battle, trying to score her own points when she heard it, felt it, even. And when she looked up, there he was, hovering in the air, calm as anything, watching everything. She rested her chin on her knees and sighed again. How does someone like him even exist? He wasn't cocky. That's what really caught her off guard. With a power like that, most people would be bragging or showing off, but he looked focused, determined. And when the zero-pointer had appeared, just like in her own moment of desperation, when she thought it was all over, he came out of nowhere. The robot's massive fist was descending, and everyone else was running. But he caught it, she said quietly. He caught it. She closed her eyes and replayed the moment over and over. The screeching metal, the ground shaking, the gasp that went through the students. He didn't hesitate. He didn't even flinch. He just reached out and grabbed it like it was a toy. Then one punch. One punch, and the entire thing shattered into nothing. Gone. Like it had never even been there. And then he was just gone. Like a breeze passing by. Achiko groaned again and buried her face in her knees. Why didn't I say anything? Why didn't I stop him? He had even talked to her before the exam. Briefly. She had been too flustered to say more than a few words. She remembered bumping into him and apologizing, only to look up and get hit by the full force of those big, gentle green eyes. His voice had been soft. She'd barely even heard what he said, too distracted by the way her heart suddenly decided to triple its beat rate. I should have asked for his name, or said thank you, or I don't know, something, one she muttered, hitting her forehead lightly with her palm. Now he probably thinks I'm just another random girl he saved. She sat up and rubbed her face. Come on, Achiko, get it together. You've got one goal, get into you, become a hero, make enough money to help your parents. That's the plan. Don't go getting all starry-eyed just because some flying Superman with perfect hair and muscles decided to casually punch a robot to death. She paused. But he was really cute. She groaned again, louder this time, and fell backward onto the futon once more. Ugh, now I'm just being a total dork about this. Still, she couldn't help it. Something about him felt different. Not just the strength, let's be real, that was absolutely nuts, but the way he carried himself. Like someone who had clawed their way up from nothing. Like someone who had been broken down before and decided to rise anyway. That wasn't something you could fake. You could see it in his eyes. In the way he didn't wait to be told to help someone. In the way he didn't stop to make a speech or look cool. He just did the right thing. Achiko stared at the ceiling again, her voice soft this time. I wonder if he even knows how amazing he is. Silence fell over the apartment again. A peaceful kind of quiet. But her heart was still loud. Still racing. Still replaying the moment the fist of a monster machine came down and was caught by a boy who shouldn't have been able to. She smiled to herself, a little sadly. Next time, I'm getting his number. Ida sat in the quiet of his room, his posture rigid and upright as always, but his mind was far from composed. The air buzzed softly with the low hum of his fan, a stack of textbooks nearby unopened. He had returned from the U.E. entrance exam several hours ago, showered, dressed in his usual lounge attire, a clean-pressed shirt and navy blue slacks, and attempted to sit down to study or read or organize his thoughts. But his mind kept going back to the same moment. The same person. Izuku Midoriya. It wasn't even that the boy had broken the rules of what Ida understood to be possible. It was the way he moved. Like a bullet through space, almost uncontrolled, almost wild, but then incredibly precise. At first, Ida had thought Midoriya was just another overly eager participant, the kind who'd rush ahead and waste energy for the sake of flair. But that opinion hadn't lasted long. He was still staring at the same sentence in his book when the door creaked open. "Hey Ida." Earth to Ida, came a familiar voice. One he blinked and looked up quickly, eyes widening. "Ida, oh. Big brother, when did you get back?" Tensei Ida stood by the doorway with a smile, dressed casually in a hoodie and jeans, a plastic bag of drinks in one hand. He walked in and set the bag on the table, ruffling his little brother's hair as he passed. "Tensei, this evening. You didn't hear me come in. I even called your name downstairs. You've been locked up here all day." Ida adjusted his glasses and tried to compose himself. "Ida, apologies. I must have been preoccupied." Tensei raised an eyebrow and plopped down in the chair across from him, cracking open a bottle of tea. "Tensei, preoccupied? That's not like you. Usually by now you'd have made a detailed breakdown of your entire performance and filed it alphabetically." He took a sip. "Tensei, did something happen?" Ida hesitated. His fingers drummed lightly against the surface of the table, a rare sign of uncertainty. He looked at his brother, his idol, really, and exhaled slowly. "Ida, I believe I did well on the exam. I responded promptly to the threats, rescued 2 other students from a collapsing structure, and secured enough points, at least by my own calculations, to qualify for consideration. But..." Tensei prompted gently. "But..." Ida leaned forward, placing his hands on the table. "Ida, there was a student, a boy I met during the exam. His name was Izuku Midoriya, and I cannot explain what I saw." Tensei's eyes narrowed with interest. "Tensei, what do you mean?" "Ida, he didn't stand out at first," Ida admitted. "Ida, he was quiet, almost unremarkable. In fact, I had assumed he was perhaps not cut out for you." He looked unsure of himself, hesitant to step into the arena. Tensei chuckled. "Tensei, sounds like someone you would have corrected on the spot." "I did," Ida said, smiling faintly. "Tensei, I told him not to waste time before the signal. And then, he moved." Ida sat back in his chair, shaking his head slowly. "Ida, I didn't see him leave the ground. One second he was there on the street near me, and the next, he was a blur. A sonic boom followed. I thought it was a malfunction at first, perhaps a support item gone haywire. But no, it was him. He was tearing through the robots at such velocity that the wind itself seemed to ripple behind him. They weren't just being defeated, they were being dismantled, crushed, torn apart as if by some invisible force." Tensei leaned forward now, eyebrows raised. "Tensei, what kind of quirk was it?" "Ida, according to the murmurs I overheard afterward, and what I read when I glanced at the tablet screen, I did my own investigation. It's called solar core." Ida folded his hands. "Ida, it passively absorbs solar energy. That was the only description." Tensei frowned. "Tensei, sounds simple enough." "Ida, it shouldn't account for what he did," Ida said firmly. "Ida, he flew." "Tensei, he flew at speeds that broke the sound barrier. He lifted debris, heavier than any first year should handle. And most of all, he destroyed the 0-pointer. Tensei blinked. "He what?" "I was there," Ida said, his voice quieter now. "Ida, I saw it. The robot descended on a girl who was injured. Everyone else ran. I was about to do the same, if I'm being honest. But then he appeared. He didn't even hesitate. He caught the machine's hand, caught it, and then he shook his head again, as if the memory refused to settle. 𝗧𝗏, he shattered it. One strike. The entire structure disintegrated. The room was silent for a moment. Tensei leaned back slowly in his chair, folding his arms. Tensei, that's not something you see every day. No, 𝗧𝗏 agreed. 𝗧𝗏, and that's what troubles me. How does a student like that go unnoticed until now? How does someone with such potential appear out of nowhere? Tensei, maybe he was hiding it, Tensei suggested. 𝗧𝗏 frowned. 𝗧𝗏, he didn't seem the type. There was something about him. A look in his eyes. Like he had never been seen before. Like no one had ever believed in him. It wasn't pride or arrogance that drove him. It was desperation. And determination. You respect him? 𝗧𝗏 nodded slowly. 𝗧𝗏, yes. I do. But I also feel unsettled. Why? Tensei asked. 𝗧𝗏, because I've trained for years, 𝗧𝗏 said. 𝗧𝗏, I've studied technique, strategy, law, ethics. I've modeled myself after you, after the ideals of heroism. But in that moment when I saw Midoriya act, he did not pause. He did not calculate. He simply was a hero. And you hesitated. Yes, 𝗧𝗏 said quietly. Tensei was quiet for a long time, then he reached over and placed a hand on 𝗧𝗏's shoulder. Tensei, you're going to make a great hero. You know why? Because you're thinking about this. Because you care. Midoriya might have power, but you have purpose. And power without purpose can be dangerous. 𝗏𝗏 looked down, unsure. Tensei, but don't let that doubt you feel turn into fear or resentment, Tensei continued. Tensei, let it drive you. Let it make you stronger. Because one day, you might be standing beside him as a classmate, or facing him as a rival. And I think you'll find you bring out the best in each other. 𝗏𝗏 met his brother's gaze and after a moment, nodded. Thank you, big brother. Tensei smiled, standing up and stretching. Tensei, now come downstairs and eat something. You've been brooding for hours. You need fuel if you're going to keep overthinking your greatness. 𝗧𝗏 chuckled despite himself and followed his brother out the door, but even as they walked, one name lingered in his thoughts. A name he would remember for a long time. Plus Izuku Midoriya. I woke up feeling strangely alert, like my body was already ready for something before my mind had even caught up. I stretched and sat up, blinking a few times against the soft light that filtered through the curtains. A whole week had passed. A full 7 days since the UA entrance exam, and yet, nothing. No message. No letter. No email. Not even a rejection. Shouldn't they have released the results by now? I muttered to myself as I dragged my feet toward the small kitchen. I yawned, grabbing the kettle and heating up water. The smell of instant coffee began to fill the room, warm and bitter. I poured it into my chipped mug and took a small sip, letting the heat spread through me. I had tried to stay positive lately. Tried to convince myself that I did well, that there was nothing to worry about. But my thoughts kept looping back. Did I do enough? Did I mess something up? I remembered every moment vividly, the way I ripped through those 2- and 3-pointers like paper, the way I dashed across the battlefield saving that frog girl from the rubble, how I caught that brown-haired girl 𝐒𝐻𝐿, I think, and shattered the 0-pointer into nothing with one punch. That had to count for something. I ran a hand through my messy hair, sighing. Maybe I was just overthinking again. I tended to do that. No scratch that, I always did that. Just as I turned to grab another sip of coffee, a sound broke through the silence. A soft ding echoed through the apartment. My head turned toward the door. In a blink, I was gone from the kitchen. Super speed carried me across the room before I had even processed the motion. My eyes flared as I activated my X-ray vision, peering through the door. Strange. There was no person standing outside, just a hovering drone. I opened the door cautiously, watching as the drone dropped a small disc into my hands before whirring away into the sky. I stepped back inside and shut the door with a quiet click. I turned the disc over in my hand, then dropped onto my worn-out couch, setting the device on the small table in front of me. A projection flared to life almost instantly, humming softly with power. And there he was. 𝐒𝐽𝐽. His golden smile stretched wide across his face, that same symbol of peace glow radiating from him. The same figure I had once worshipped, once idolized to the point of obsession. If this had been a year ago, I might have cried. I might have screamed with joy and disbelief. But now all I felt was hollow, cold. I couldn't idolize someone like him anymore, not after what happened. Because it wasn't just a harsh truth he told me that day. It wasn't realism. It was cruelty. He looked me in the eyes and told me, without flinching, that I couldn't be a hero without a quirk. No hesitation. No sympathy. Cold fact. That was the day I broke. The day I stood on the edge of an abandoned industrial building and looked down, wondering if my life even had a point. I jumped that day. I really did. I let myself fall, hoping for silence at the end. But instead I floated. That's when Solar Core awakened. Even now, thinking about it made my chest tighten. I was only alive because of a quirk that activated too late to stop the trauma, but just in time to stop the death. I survived. But a part of me didn't. A part of me still lay on that rooftop, motionless and broken. And 𝗏𝐽𝐽, he was the one who pushed me there. I gained an incredible quirk later, sure. But it's a matter of principle. He crushed a boy who needed hope. That's not a man worth looking up to. 𝗏𝐽𝐽's voice began to play through the projection. Young Midoriya, if you're seeing this, then that means the exam results have been finalized. I must say, you exceeded every expectation. His image laughed as if this were some joke. I didn't laugh. I stared blankly at the projection, waiting. In the written portion, you ranked in the top 3, an impressive feat considering the time constraints and the difficulty of the questions. And as for the practical, well, that's where things got interesting. He paused as the projection shifted to footage. Images of me tearing through robots, saving students, moving faster than the eye could follow. The camera struggled to track me as I weaved between targets, dismantling enemy units with precision and devastating strength. You broke a record, young man. A record that has stood since you was founded. In 10 minutes, you scored a total of 113 combat points and 67 rescue points. That's a combined total of 180 points. The previous record. You didn't just pass, you redefined what's possible. I blinked. 180 points. That explained the silence. They probably had to verify it again and again. Probably thought it was a glitch in the system. Your performance left the staff speechless. Even Principal Nizu reviewed your file personally. You didn't just show power, you showed instinct, control, and most importantly heart. Saved 2 students without hesitation, despite the danger around you. That's the mark of a true hero. I clenched my jaw slightly. Funny how the same man who told me I'd never be a hero was now calling me one. Congratulations, Midoriya Izuku. Welcome to you. High school. The projection flickered and faded out. I stared at the empty space where his image once stood. The silence crept back into the apartment, thick and heavy. My eyes drifted toward the disc on the table. Slowly, I leaned forward and turned it off. I stood up and walked to the window, pulling back the curtain. The sun was rising, its warm rays flooding the city with light. I could feel it on my skin, the hum of energy beneath the surface. A week ago, I was doubting myself, wondering if I had done enough. Now I had my answer. They couldn't ignore me anymore. I was in. Time skip. I looked in a mirror, finally dressed. So this was Yue's school uniform. The blazer hugged my frame well, sharp and neat. Standing at 5'8½", I didn't look like the scrawny kid people used to whisper about anymore. My body had changed ever since my quirk awakened. I had a lean, athletic build now, like someone who spent hours training instead of just taking notes about training. My skin looked clearer and smoother, almost like the stress and pressure of being powerless had been scrubbed off me. My eyes, once timid and often downcast, seemed to glow with an emerald hue. It wasn't just the color, it was the focus in them now. Determination. My hair, though still messy and tousled, had gotten a bit softer too. Less wiry. Yet it kept that wild edge, like it didn't want to be tamed. Staring back at me was a person who seemed caught between cute and handsome, someone different from the weakling I used to be. This was going to be my first day. I thought inwardly with a smile. I can finally be a hero. I left the apartment, locking the door behind me. There was no one to wave me off. No proud parent. No congratulations. Just me. The empty silence of a place that had never quite felt like home. It didn't matter, though. I had made it. This was a major step in the dream I'd been chasing since I was 4 years old. A dream everyone had once called impossible. My life starts now. I got off the train and walked the rest of the way to UA. The towering buildings loomed ahead, polished and futuristic, radiating promise. Finding my classroom wasn't hard. My supervision had already scanned and mapped the entire building as I passed through the gates. I knew where everything was: the cafeteria, the gym, the teacher's lounge, and of course, Class 1A. As I stood before the massive door, I blinked. It was huge. Way too big for a normal classroom. I could have used my vision to see who was already inside, but I didn't. That felt. I didn't want to start off as the creepy guy invading people's privacy. I guess my classmates are just beyond this door, I whispered to myself. I opened the door and stepped inside. And immediately, chaos greeted me. "Tenya, don't put your legs on the desk. Don't you see that you are being disrespectful towards our classmates that once used these desks that are now our upperclassmen?" The voice was firm, loud, and righteous. I turned my head. A tall guy with square-framed glasses stood stiffly, pointing accusingly. "That's Tenya Ida, right? I remember him, Bakugo. And you think I give a F which school coughed up this extra?" Came a louder, far more aggressive voice. My gaze shifted. "Tenya, I'm from 𝗬𝗵𝗲 Junior High School." Tenya Ida, the glasses-wearing guy, said, straight-backed, clearly not rattled. "Bakugo, 𝗬𝗵𝗲. Aren't you an elite?" The blonde replied, almost scoffing. "Bakugo, I guess I have another reason to drive my foot up your butt." It was Bakugo. Of course it was. He sat with one leg kicked up on the desk, arms folded, expression dripping with arrogance. "Ida, what nerve. And you want to be a hero?" Ida continued, his voice tight with restraint. I paused. This wasn't how I imagined my first day would go. Then, the sound of the door opening echoed again, and suddenly, all eyes turned toward me. The chatter paused. The room stilled. I stepped forward, smiling gently. "Issei, good morning." 3 Ida was the first to approach me. He moved quickly, straight posture and all. His voice was calmer than it had been just moments ago. "Ida, I want to apologize for how I acted during the entrance exams. I was hasty in my assumptions." I blinked. "Izuki, it's fine really. I kind of forgot about it, honestly." He looked relieved, nodded firmly, then stepped aside. Then I noticed them 2 girls sitting not far from each other. The first was Achiko. The other. I recognized both of them immediately. I'd saved them during the exam. Achiko was the girl I'd caught from the 0-pointer after she'd been pinned. Tsuyu almost got squished by some 3-pointer before I jumped in. Both their eyes locked onto mine. Tsuyu's gaze was calm, unreadable, but there was a flicker of recognition. Achiko, though, flushed pink. Her face turned red like a tomato. She was the only one who managed to actually speak. "Achiko, hey, Izuku," she said, fiddling with her fingers. "Hi," I answered. Simple. But somehow, it felt nice. From the corner of my eye, I felt a glare boring into me. I turned. It was Bakugo. He looked like he'd just bitten into something sour. His hands were clenched under the desk, jaw tight. His eyes practically screamed 1,000 things, all unsaid but far from silent. When did that loser awaken a quirk? He thought, seething. Does he really think he could surpass me just because he's no longer quirkless? 1. Do you think you're special, Deku? His mind was a storm of bitterness and confusion. He'd heard about Midoriya through the Aldra school group chat, rumors spreading like wildfire. Midoriya got into UA. Not just barely scraping by either. The kid had apparently smashed the entrance exam, scoring ridiculously high. It didn't make sense. After the sludge villain incident, Midoriya had vanished. At first, he'd assumed the quirkless loser had finally taken his advice and given up. But now, here he was, standing tall. No trembling, no hesitation. One and it set him off. When I noticed his stare, I didn't react. I just really hoped that they'd give me an opportunity to face him. Just once. A fair fight. Enough, a dry voice called from the back of the room. I turned sharply. Someone was crawling out of a yellow sleeping bag on the floor. What the dash? He stood up, slowly, brushing hair out of his tired-looking face. Aizawa, my name is Shota Aizawa, and just like that, everything got quiet. Who's that? Someone muttered. The man unzipped the bag just enough to reveal his exhausted, bloodshot eyes, scanning the room with an unimpressed glare. It took you 8 seconds to quiet down. Time is limited. Rational students wouldn't waste it. A beat of silence. Then, wait, is he our teacher? Without ceremony, the man wriggled out of his sleeping bag, standing in his rumpled black hero costume, capture weapon loosely draped around his neck. He dug into his pocket and pulled out a gym uniform, tossing it onto the desk. Aizawa, put these on and meet me at ground beta. A blonde student shot up, grinning. What's the deal with the dash? Aizawa's scarf lashed out, wrapping around the boy in an instant, yanking him forward until they were face to face. His hair lifted, eyes glowing red, his quirk nullifying the students in an instant. The class recoiled. Aizawa, you're wasting my time, Aizawa said flatly. Aizawa, and if you keep wasting it, you'll learn the hard way why that's a bad idea. He released him, turning toward the door. Aizawa, be outside in 5 minutes. Or don't bother coming back. The door slid shut behind him. The class sat frozen. What the hell was that? Time skip, that man is weird, I muttered as I pulled the UA gym shirt over my head. The fabric fits snugly around my torso, tighter than I expected. I glanced at my reflection in the bathroom mirror again, blinking a few times. I never realized I was this muscular. My frame was still lean, built more for agility than brute strength, but the definition was undeniable. My arms were toned, my chest was firm, and my abs. 6 solid lines formed a defined six-pack, like something out of a fitness magazine. My skin, fair and a little flushed from changing quickly, stretched over muscle that didn't seem like it belonged to the same kid who used to be called Deku in middle school. I hadn't even done any extreme training like lifting weights or bodybuilding, not that I remembered. Not like I eat much anyways. Third-person view. 6 third-person view. The bathroom door swung shut behind him with a soft hiss, the quiet hum of fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Izuku stepped in and moved toward the sink, turning on the tap and splashing a bit of water on his face. He didn't need it, but something about the moment, the silence, the solitude helped him keep his nerves steady. His reflection stared back at him, green eyes glowing faintly like polished emeralds, hair still wild and tousled but somehow softer than it used to be. His features had become more defined, a mix of boyish charm and something sharper, something more mature. The door creaked again and a voice broke the silence. You're Midoriya, right? Izuku turned, blinking in surprise. A tall boy with short black hair and a relaxed smile had walked in. His sharp eyes had a lazy confidence about them. One Kaminari. I'm Kaminari Denki, he said, stepping up beside him at the sink. Kaminari? Dude, you're kind of famous already, you know that. You broke the entrance exam record. That was you, right? Izuku's eyes widened. Famous? He asked, voice unsure. Izuku, I didn't know people knew about that. Oh, people know, another voice chimed in from behind them. A boy with red spiky hair and sharp teeth stepped forward, slapping a hand on Kaminari's shoulder. Kirishima Ijuru. Nice to meet ya, Midoriya. Man, you really tore up the field during the exam. Everyone's been talking about it. Izuku flushed slightly, rubbing the back of his neck. Izuku, I just did what I could. Just did what you could. A third voice laughed. You got the highest score in UA history. That's not just doing what you could, that's going plus ultra from the start. The speaker this time was 𝗧𝗏 Hanta, tall and slender with a mischievous glint in his eyes. He leaned casually against the wall near the hand dryers. 𝗧𝗏, I saw the footage, heard you saved like 2 girls and took down some insane robot. How'd you even do that? Your quirk must be insane. It's called Solar Core, Izuku murmured. I'm still figuring it out, honestly. I didn't even know it could do most of that until it happened. Kirishima, wait, so it's one of those body enhancement quirks? Kirishima asked, eyes narrowing with interest. Kirishima, like it boosts your strength and stuff. Izuku, I guess. Stores energy and then circulates it through my body. It keeps adapting, like it's always trying to push me to the next level, Izuku explained, still hesitant, still trying to find the words. Kaminari, yo, that's pretty sick, Kaminari whistled. Kaminari, no wonder you look like that. I thought you were one of those gym rats at first. Izuku blinked. Izuku, what do you mean? Kaminari, I mean, no offense, but you look like a cinnamon roll, but a jacked cinnamon roll, Kaminari grinned. Kaminari, like, soft face, but you've got arms that could bend steel, Izuku. I really haven't done that much training, Izuku admitted, voice growing small. Izuku, I think the quirk's doing it on its own. I only started training seriously after I awakened it. Zero, he's modest too, Zero chuckled. Zero, great. Now I feel like a bum. Before Izuku could reply, another voice joined in, calm and quiet but with a polite curiosity behind it. Shoji, are you all preparing for the quirk assessment? It was 𝗂𝗍𝗵𝗲, towering over the others with his many arms. Despite his intimidating size, his presence was gentle. Shoji, we should make the most of the 5 minutes Aizawa gave us. Kirishima, yeah, we're just talking to Midoriya here, Kirishima said, gesturing toward him. Kirishima, he's the one who broke the entrance exam record. Shoji looked at him thoughtfully, then nodded. Shoji, impressive. I am 𝗂𝗍𝗵𝗲. It's good to meet you. A shorter boy with a strange purple dome of hair strolled in behind him, trying not to look too impressed. Minoru Mineta. I heard about you too. Kind of hard not to. You knocked out the scoring system, right? Guess the girls love that kind of thing. Izuku didn't know how to respond to that. He wasn't used to being noticed, let alone admired. His cheeks were burning now. 𝗃𝗵𝗲, another voice introduced itself. The boy's head was avian, but his posture and voice were calm, composed. 𝗃𝗵𝗲, strength aside, I heard you were decisive and protected others during the exam. That is a quality I respect. Thank you, Izuku said, bowing slightly out of reflex. 2 more students entered next. One had long, black hair tied in a ponytail and wore rectangular glasses. The other was more reserved, with small goggles resting on his forehead and shaggy brown hair. 2, Yuga Aoyama, the flamboyant one said with a sparkle in his smile. Aoyama, though you may be dazzling, you are now in the presence of true brilliance. The other gave a small wave. Kota, Kota. Good to meet you. All the attention was overwhelming. Izuku kept nodding and smiling, struggling to keep up with all the names. He hadn't expected this at all. Back in middle school, no one ever spoke to him like this, let alone with admiration. And yet, while the others laughed and joked and talked around him, one boy stood apart. Near the wall, arms crossed, eyes hard and unmoving. Bakugo. Izuku could feel the weight of his stare even though he hadn't looked directly. It was hot, angry, burning a hole in the back of his head. He didn't have to hear what Bakugo was thinking. He could feel it. Izuku swallowed, forcing himself not to look. He could deal with Bakugo later. Right now, these people, his classmates, were showing him something he'd never had before: curiosity, camaraderie, interest. The timer on the wall beeped. Shoji, time's up, Shoji muttered. One by one, they started heading out of the bathroom, the easy chatter trailing behind them. Izuku lingered a moment, staring once more at his reflection. His eyes glowed faintly. He smiled just a little, then turned and followed them back into the world. Unknowingly, Shoto Todoroki had been staring hard at Izuku like as if he was an obstacle, a wall he had to scale through to prove something. He balled his fist. I don't care how strong you are, nothing is going to get in my way of surpassing my father and all might, he whispered, and unfortunately for him Izuku's super hearing heard the whole thing. Izuku muttered, I feel so sorry for him already. Author's note. Apologies for the unexpected hiatus. Life, particularly the relentless demands of school, has kept me away, but I'm thrilled to be back and deeply grateful to all of you who've been following this story so far. Your support means everything, and I'm excited to share that the roadmap for this tale is fully plotted all the way through UA's sports festival. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Feedback is the lifeblood of any creative project, so don't hold back what's working for you. What could be sharper, deeper, or more surprising? Are there moments or relationships you're especially invested in? Your thoughts will help shape the evolution of this story, so please, share them freely. Regarding Jiro and other characters not yet woven into the romantic subplots, I'll be honest, her absence from the protagonist's potential relationships wasn't an oversight so much as a narrative challenge. While characters like Momo, Uraraka, and others had connections that could happen naturally in the story, Jiro's dynamic with Izuku never quite clicked into place, or basically I had no idea on how they could go past being friends. The same goes for figures like Midnight, Mirko, or Melissa. As much as I adore them, forcing a romance without the right foundation would just be wrong. But if any of you have compelling ideas for how Jiro or others could realistically and meaningfully intersect with the protagonist's journey, whether through shared interests, conflicting ideologies, or a slow-burn emotional arc, I'm all ears. Surprise me. Change my mind. This story is as much yours as it is mine. Thank you truly for sticking around. The next chapters are brewing, and I can't wait to dive back into future arc. The morning sun hung high over the U campus as Class 1A gathered on the training field, their uniforms crisp and postures tense with anticipation. Aziawa Shota stood before them, his tired eyes scanning the group with an air of indifference that did little to mask the calculating sharpness beneath. His capture weapon hung loosely around his neck, and his hands were buried deep in his pockets as if the entire affair bored him. "All right," he began, his voice low and gravelly, cutting through the murmurs of the students. "Aziawa, today, we're doing a quirk apprehension test." A ripple of confusion passed through the group. Kirishima, ever eager, raised a hand. "Kirishima, wait, what about the entrance ceremony? Or, like, guidance sessions?" Aziawa didn't even blink. "Aziawa, if you're here to play school, transfer out now. Heroes don't get the luxury of easing into things. You'll be tested and you'll be pushed. That starts today." His gaze flickered across them, lingering briefly on Midoriya, who stood with an unusual stillness, his green eyes sharp and focused in a way that didn't quite match his former demeanor. Bakugo scoffed, crossing his arms. "Bakugo, about DMN time. Let's see who's actually worth being here." Aziawa ignored him and pulled out a small device, projecting a holographic list of standard fitness tests: 50-meter dash, grip strength, standing long jump, repeated side steps, ball throw, sit-ups, seated toe touch, and endurance running. "Aziawa, you've done these in middle school," Aziawa said. "Aziawa, but this time, you'll use your quirks. The government still insists on keeping things standardized for fairness, but that's a joke. Real combat isn't standardized. So today we see what you're really capable of." Uraraka blinked. "Achiko, wait, we can use our quirks. That's amazing." Aizawa's expression didn't change. "Aziawa, it's not amazing. It's necessary. If you can't use your quirk effectively in basic physical tests, you have no business calling yourself a hero." His eyes slid toward Izuku again, as if expecting something. Izuku met his gaze, unflinching. There was no muttering, no frantic energy, just quiet readiness. Aizawa continued. "Aizawa, Bakugo, you scored the second highest in the entrance exam. What was your best softball throw in middle school?" Bakugo smirked. "Bakugo, 67 meters. But that was without my quirk." Aizawa tossed him a ball. "Bakugo, do it again. This time, use your quirk. Don't hold back." Bakugo caught the ball, rolling it in his palm before stepping into the circle. With a roar, he wound up and unleashed an explosion at the peak of his throw, sending the ball rocketing into the sky. The device in Aizawa's hand beeped, displaying the result: 705. 2 meters. The class erupted in shock. "Kaminari, whoa. Over 700 meters. Kaminari gaped. "Zero, that's insane." Zero added. Bakugo grinned, cracking his knuckles. "Bakugo, told you extras I was the best here." Aizawa remained unimpressed. Aizawa, good. Now the rest of you understand the standard. He turned his attention back to the group. Aizawa, this is what it means to use your quirks to their full potential. If you can't keep up, you don't belong here. A heavy silence fell. Then his voice dropped lower, colder. Aizawa, by the way, the student who comes in last place in this assessment will be judged hopeless and expelled. The class froze. What? Several voices shouted in unison. Ida chopped his hand through the air. Lida, that's completely unfair. We just started. How can you dash? Aizawa cut him off. Aizawa, life isn't fair. Villains won't care if you're having a bad day. Natural disasters don't wait for you to be ready. His eyes darkened. Aizawa, if you can't prove you have potential now, you'll just die later. So give it everything you've got. The air grew thick with tension. Izuku, still silent, clenched his fists slightly. His expression was unreadable, no fear, no panic. Just focus. Aizawa's lips curled slightly. Aizawa, any questions? Let's begin. And with that, the test and the threat of expulsion hung over them like a blade. The early morning sun filtered through the clear glass windows of the training field, casting long lines across the dusty, open terrain where Class 1A had gathered for their quirk apprehension test. The air was still heavy with the tension left behind by Aizawa's blunt announcement. No orientation, no warm-up tours, just performance. There were no exceptions. Standing at the edge of the field with the rest of the students spaced out behind him, Katsuki Bakugo had just launched the softball deep into the sky with an explosion that cracked the wind. The ball arced and eventually dropped down beyond the 100-meter mark. A digital counter on the screen nearby buzzed to life. 705 meters. Some of the students cheered. A few blinked in surprise. But most looked toward the next name on Aizawa's tablet with varying degrees of anticipation. There was a hum of whispers as Aizawa adjusted his scarf. Aizawa, Midoriya. You're up. Izuku didn't flinch. He didn't hesitate. He stepped forward slowly, catching the ball Aizawa tossed toward him with a light thud in his palm. For a brief second, the class stilled, gazes narrowing or widening depending on who had seen what during the entrance exam. Some had watched the live feed. Others had only heard rumors. But now, here, on even ground, they were all about to witness it firsthand. Aizawa watched him closely, his mouth drawn in a thin line. We saw how he used it during the entrance exam. But was that a fluke or something he can consciously control? I need to know if he's more than just raw power. If he can't control it, he'll be a danger to everyone around him, even himself. One Izuku took a breath. He rolled the ball in his palm once. He still felt awkward with this kind of attention, but he'd come here for a reason. He wasn't scared of Bakugo's throw. In fact, he saw it as a challenge. Aizawa gave a small nod. Aizawa, whenever you're ready. He didn't shout. He didn't scream. Izuku simply reeled his arm back, and the moment his muscles engaged, light shimmered faintly across his skin, he threw it. The ball vanished in a flash, leaving behind a streak of burning orange plasma in the air that hissed through the sky like a small comet. It didn't arc. It didn't slow. It just kept going. Most of the class had to cover their eyes or squint against the sudden brightness. The counter took a moment. Then it beeped. 1,870 meters. The silence was instant and loud. Kaminari's jaw dropped open. Kirishima muttered something that could only be described as reverent. Even Tokoyami blinked twice. And Bakugo, standing with his arms crossed, let out a soft click of his tongue, the tension in his eyes impossible to miss. Lida, no wonder he broke the entrance record. Ida muttered under his breath, adjusting his glasses. Uraraka clapped absent-mindedly before realizing no one else had moved, her eyes wide. Uraraka, that was... It disappeared. Shoji, I couldn't even see it, Shoji added, his voice quiet. Zero, he left a plasma trail, Zero muttered. Zero, like how? Kaminari. He didn't even wind up that much, Kaminari said, blinking rapidly. Kaminari, like, no dramatic build-up or anything. Aizawa checked the reading again, then turned away from the screen, his scarf rustling lightly. He said nothing, but he did take another mental note. It's not just raw energy. He has directional control. No injuries. No sign of strain. So far. Stable. 3. The test continued, and slowly the class began to find its rhythm again. Next up was the 50-meter dash. Ida was the first to take off, engines roaring from his calves. His time, 3.4 seconds. The others followed. Kaminari managed 5.49 seconds. 𝗧𝗏 came in close to 6 flat. Tokoyami, long-legged and precise, clocked in at 4. Then it was Izuku's turn again. He took position quietly. No words, no showboating. When the buzzer blared, he moved. Or rather, he vanished. The timer barely registered it before stopping. 0.01 seconds. Kaminari, are you serious? Kaminari shouted. Kirishima, that wasn't speed. Kirishima said, jaw slack. Kirishima, that was teleportation. Tokoyami, no. I don't think he even activated anything. Tokoyami murmured. Tokoyami, his body, moved on instinct. That wasn't a speed quirk. It's like his body evolved to do that naturally. Aoyama, his footwork didn't even distort the ground. Aoyama whispered, stunned. Aoyama, that kind of output would usually leave craters. Actually, that's due to his tactile telekinesis field. It's an ability I forgot to add to his bio. Basically the reason why he can carry things without them breaking apart when flying or running. Aizawa narrowed his eyes. No time lag. No recoil. His movements are balanced. That level of acceleration should snap ligaments or dislocate joints if it weren't properly adapted. His quirk is doing more than just boosting him. It's reshaping him internally. 5. Then came grip strength. Kirishima set the bar high with an impressive 540 kilograms. Shoji beat even that. But when Izuku stepped forward, took the handle, and gently squeezed, the machine gave a strangled beat before crumbling with a sharp crack. Bits of its frame split. A puff of smoke rose from the core. Izuku blinked and looked down at the fragments. Izuku, I didn't mean to break it. Mineta. It crumbled like wet clay. Mineta whispered, eyes wide. Mineta, how strong is this guy? Uraraka stared. Uraraka, back then I thought he looked kinda soft the first time I met him. To Shoji. He looks like a model but moves like a war machine. Shoji said from nearby, arms crossed thoughtfully. Kota quietly stepped away after his own attempt, casting Izuku a look that mixed awe and confusion. Even Aoyama, who rarely showed genuine emotion behind his glittering facade, looked truly humbled. When it came to the side jump, Midoriya didn't even shift weight. His feet barely touched the ground between each burst. His body moved like he weighed nothing at all, skipping cleanly between the flags like light refracted off water. Aizawa didn't bother commenting. He knew the readings would be exceptional again. But through it all, the other students weren't idle. Kirishima gave every trial his all, shouting manly encouragements regardless of his own performance. 𝗧𝗏 cracked jokes even as he tripped over a measuring stick during the repeated side steps. Kaminari accidentally shorted out one of the monitors during his electric burst challenge, scratching his head with an apologetic grin while Jiro rolled her eyes nearby. Shoji dominated raw strength categories while being careful not to overshadow the smaller students. Tokoyami remained cool and composed, his shadow moving with eerie precision during a shadow reflex segment Aizawa tossed in at the last minute. Even Mineta tried to stay competitive, sticking his pop-off ball to the wall and trying to swing himself through the air like a makeshift monkey bar routine. He failed, but he gave it a shot. But no matter how well anyone did, Izuku's scores kept turning heads. Every time he stepped forward, there was a weight to the air. A presence. And despite that, he never once acted smug. If anything, he seemed increasingly flustered each time someone complimented him, bowing quickly, muttering thanks, and looking like he wanted to disappear under his collar. When it was all over, Aizawa stood before them again, eyes scanning the screen on his device. Aizawa, no one's getting expelled, he said finally. Aizawa, it was a rational deception. I wanted to see how you handled pressure. The students exhaled all at once. Some groaned. Others laughed. 𝗧𝗏 fell to his knees dramatically. Aizawa, but make no mistake, Aizawa continued. Aizawa, these tests were real. This is the level of performance you'll be expected to maintain and improve if you want to stay here. That includes you, Midoriya. Izuku nodded quickly, eyes serious. Behind him, Bakugo stood, arms crossed, his knuckles white. He hadn't said a word all day. But he'd seen everything. And for the first time in years, the fire in his eyes wasn't just rage. It was fear. And something much, much worse. Recognition. 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗵𝗲 first-person view. The classroom buzzed with conversation, low murmurs flowing like waves as everyone gradually settled into their seats. My heart still hadn't quite caught up with everything that had just happened. From the apprehension test to Aizawa-sensei's harsh methods, and the way everyone had stared at me during each test. It was a whirlwind. I tried to keep my head down as I took my seat, glancing around the room. Most of the students were still sneaking looks my way, some with curiosity, others with a trace of awe. Even Bakugo, sitting several rows back, was quiet. That alone was unnerving. I gripped the edge of my desk and exhaled slowly. After the last trial ended, Aizawa-sensei had simply told us to head back to class, but his expression lingered in my mind. He hadn't looked as disappointed as before. If anything, there was a hint of approval in his tired gaze. "Kaminari, man, that was insane," Kaminari said from behind me, leaning forward with a wide grin. "Kaminari, that ball throw. I thought it was gonna break the sound barrier or something." Zero nodded beside him. "Zero, no kidding. I swear it left a heat trail. Your quirk didn't sound like what you said in the lockers, man." All eyes drifted to me again. I scratched the back of my head sheepishly, trying to smile, though I could feel the BLD rushing to my cheeks. "Izuku, it's really not that flashy," I began, looking down at my fingers. "Izuku, it's basically photosynthesis. My body absorbs sunlight and converts it into energy. The more I absorb, the stronger and faster I become. It's kind of like a supercharged metabolism, I guess." "Kirishima, not flashy." Kirishima exclaimed from a few rows away, wide-eyed. "Kirishima, bro, you crushed the grip strength meter like it was a soda can. That was totally manly." Ashido laughed, swinging in her seat and folding her arms. "Ashido, no wonder you broke the entrance exam score record. You're like a solar-powered tank." Wait, he broke the record." 𝗓𝗪 blinked, her earphone jacks twitching. "As in the record." Tokoyami glanced at me and gave a small nod. Tokoyami, from what I heard, his feats during the entrance exam were formidable. A true display of heroism. I wasn't sure what to say to all of that. I smiled weakly, cheeks burning hotter than ever, and shrank a bit in my seat. I was basically new to this much attention. That's when Ida stood up, straight as always, pushing his glasses up the bridge of his nose. "Ida, now that we've concluded the day's trials and returned to class, I believe it's appropriate for the female students to introduce themselves. After all, it's important for us to know and respect our classmates." The girls exchanged glances, some raising eyebrows, others chuckling softly. "Achiko, I guess that's fair," Achiko said with a cheerful nod. "Achiko, well, I'll start then. My name's Achiko Uraraka. I want to become a pro hero to give my parents a better life. My quirk's zero gravity. If I touch something, I can make it float." Next to her, a girl with a green tint to her skin and a wide, calm gaze gave a small wave. "Tsuyu, I'm Tsuyu Azui. But just call me Tsu. My quirk is frog. I can do pretty much anything a frog can." Mina Ashido leaned back in her chair, grinning. "I'm Mina Ashido, and my quirk is acid. I can secrete acid from my body and control how corrosive it is. Pretty cool, right?" 𝗓𝗪 glanced around, earphone jacks twitching, before speaking up in her usual low, somewhat disinterested tone. "𝗓𝗪, 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏. My quirk's earphone jack. I can plug these into things and amplify my heartbeat into sound waves." The tall, calm girl with the aristocratic posture gave a courteous bow from her seat. "Momo, my name is Momo Yaoyorozu. My quirk is creation. I can create any non-living material, as long as I know its molecular structure. I'm honored to study alongside all of you." Toru Hagikure's voice rang out from nowhere, literally nowhere. "Hi. I'm Toru Hagikure, but you can call me Toru. My quirk is invisibility. I've been invisible since Bart." I found myself nodding along, trying to remember all the names. The room had finally started to feel alive. Not just a collection of elite students, but classmates. People I could talk to. Eventually, the bell rang, signaling the end of the day. Everyone stood up, stretching and gathering their things, buzzing with the energy of shared excitement and nerves. I lingered a little longer, trying to sort my thoughts, when I felt a hand clap my shoulder. "Hey," Kirishima said with a grin. "Kirishima, you're all right, Midoriya? Wanna exchange numbers?" "Why, yeah, sure." He passed me his phone, and before I knew it, 𝗧𝗏 joined in too, followed by Kaminari. "𝗧𝗏, gotta keep in touch, right?" 𝗧𝗏 said. "We're classmates now." That single sentence echoed in my chest like a warm pulse. Classmates? Friends? I typed in my number, not trusting my voice. I never thought I'd have something like this. Not after years of being alone and told I couldn't be a hero. I was just about to slip my phone into my bag when I noticed two figures approaching. I looked up and nearly choked. Achiko and Tsuyu stood there, hesitating for a moment before stepping closer. Both of them were fidgeting, their faces tinged pink. "Achiko, hey," Midoriya Achiko began, rubbing her arm and smiling shyly. "Achiko, we never really got the chance to thank you. You know, for what you did during the entrance exam." "Tsuyu, that's right," Tsuyu added, her voice calm but softer than usual. "Tsuyu, you helped both of us, even though you didn't have to. You saved our lives." "Izuku, I stammered, panicking slightly. "Izuku, it wasn't a big deal. I mean, it was a big deal, but anyone would have done it. Achiko, you're really amazing," Achiko said, her gaze meeting mine. "Achiko, I was so nervous coming here. But now I'm glad I did." Tsuyu nodded. "Tsuyu, you're easy to talk to too. I hope we can be good friends." Plus I didn't know how to respond. My heart was racing, my face felt like it was burning, and I could barely form words. Somehow, I managed to nod. "Izuku, same. I hope so too." We stood there awkwardly for a few moments, all three of us blushing messes, until Tsuyu smiled and gently tugged Achiko away, muttering something about letting me breathe. As they walked off, I remained rooted in place, dazed and lightheaded. Friends, classmates, people who appreciated me. I never thought I'd feel this way. But somehow, just maybe, I really did belong here. Again, sorry for the long update, and to apologize in the next few minutes, I'll drop another chapter after this. Aizawa entered the quiet office with his usual lazy gait, hands stuffed into his pockets, scarf hanging loose around his neck. The scent of fresh coffee lingered in the air as Principal Nizu sat perched on his chair, tail swaying rhythmically as he glanced over some documents. Across the room, Toshinori Yagi stood with arms crossed, posture stiff despite the usual gentle expression on his face. "So," Nizu began, his tone bright but curious. "Nizu, how did the quirk apprehension test go?" Aizawa exhaled through his nose, not bothering to sit as he leaned against the wall near the door. His eyes, half-lidded but alert, moved toward Toshinori briefly before returning to the principal. "Aizawa, let's not pretend, it was mostly to test Izuku Midoriya." Toshinori's chest sank slightly at Aizawa's words. He looked down at the floor, jaw tightening as thoughts spiraled in his head. The boy. The same boy he once told that a quirkless person couldn't become a hero. He was now the subject of discussion between UA's most trusted educators. Not just discussion focus. Interest. Speculation. He had been so sure back then, so confident in his judgment, and now everything he thought he knew was being appended by that same boy's quiet strength. One Aizawa. He didn't strain himself during the test. Aizawa continued, drawing both their attention back. Aizawa held back, probably out of habit. But even while holding back, the results are, they speak for themselves. Nizu's whiskers twitched with interest. "Nizu, go on." Aizawa, for the ball throw, he recorded 1,870 meters. Aizawa said flatly. Aizawa, and I'm fairly confident that was casual. No real exertion. His expression didn't change, and there was zero strain on his arm. The boy didn't even breathe heavily afterward. Toshinori blinked. Toshinori, almost 2 kilometers. Aizawa nodded. Aizawa, 50-meter dash in 0.01 seconds. He was already standing at the finish line by the time the system finished detecting the starting movement. The camera footage glitched trying to catch it. Nizu, And the grip strength test? 𝗎𝗓 asked, clasping his small paws together with a tilted head. Aizawa destroyed the machine. Aizawa's mouth twitched ever so slightly. Aizawa, he turned it into scrap. Apologized immediately after, seemed genuinely embarrassed. But again, no sign of effort. He didn't even tense up. Toshinori stepped forward slowly. Toshinori, so his quirk, how exactly does it work again? Aizawa reached into his pocket and pulled out a notepad with his usual meticulous scribbles. Aizawa, from what he's explained, and from what I saw during the entrance exam in this test, his quirk is called Solar Core. It mimics photosynthesis, absorbing solar energy through his skin and converting it into raw physical capability. Strength, speed, stamina, and seemingly, flight. I'm still not sure of the mechanics behind that, but it was definitely on display at the entrance. 𝗎𝗓 nodded thoughtfully. 𝗎𝗓, like a living solar battery. Fascinating. Aizawa, he doesn't burn out either, Aizawa added. Aizawa? Or at least not visibly. He was calm and composed throughout the day, didn't show any signs of fatigue, even after expending what would be enormous amounts of energy for anyone else. So, 𝗎𝗓 said after a pause, 𝗎𝗓, from what you've observed, what's his estimated power level? Aizawa was quiet for a moment. The silence dragged, punctuated only by the gentle hum of the office's heater and the scratching of 𝗎𝗓's pen as he idly doodled on the corner of a document. Toshinori stood still, heart-heavy with a strange mixture of regret and awe. Aizawa, I don't like assigning arbitrary power levels, Aizawa eventually said, voice a bit gruffer than before. Aizawa, but if we're going by current stats, and this is him holding back, then we're not looking at a student who simply belongs at UA. Toshinori looked up sharply. Aizawa, we're looking at someone who could easily fight with, or even against, current pro heroes, Aizawa finished. Aizawa, as for his potential, is refined. Maybe even top 10. And that's without any professional combat training yet. Toshinori, that's incredible, Toshinori murmured. Toshinori, he has that kind of strength already. Aizawa, he's also extremely humble, Aizawa said. Aizawa didn't brag once. When I confronted him about his quirk, he looked more anxious than proud. Like he was afraid of standing out too much. But it's impossible not to notice him. The power's overwhelming and it's efficient, controlled. His movements are clean, precise. No wasted effort. 𝗎𝗓's eyes sparkled. 𝗎𝗓, and what do you make of his mental fortitude? Aizawa's eyes narrowed slightly. Aizawa, stable, cautious, observant, possibly a bit self-deprecating, but that may be due to his past experiences. He still acts like a kid who doesn't want to draw attention to himself. 𝗎𝗓 tapped a claw against his chin. 𝗎𝗓, that may be our greatest challenge then. Helping him grow into his presence without retreating from it. Toshinori's fingers clenched at his side. The boy. No, not just a boy. A miracle of quiet strength. All those years of being told he was nothing, and yet he stood tall without resentment. It was admirable. It was heartbreaking. It made Toshinori question the weight of his own words back then, and whether he had helped delay the rise of someone who could surpass even the greatest. One Aizawa, we'll need to be careful, Aizawa continued. Aizawa, the last thing we want is for other students or the media to start treating him like an anomaly. He's already on thin emotional ice from what I can tell. If we mishandle this, it could push him into isolation again. I agree, 𝗎𝗓 said. 𝗎𝗓, but I also believe he's the kind of student who can grow with the right kind of support. We'll monitor his progress closely. Toshinori stepped closer, a hint of conviction returning to his voice. Toshinori, if he's willing, I'd like to help him, train him, guide him where I failed before. One Aizawa glanced sideways at him, his expression unreadable. Aizawa, then I suggest you start by listening to him this time. Toshinori lowered his head slightly. Toshinori, I intend to. There was silence again, heavy and thoughtful. Then 𝗎𝗓 finally spoke, tapping a few notes on the tablet in front of him. 𝗎𝗓, well then, it seems Izuku Midoriya will be one of the most interesting students we've ever had. Let's not waste the opportunity to help him shine. Shoto slammed the door behind him harder than he intended to. The house was quiet, but the echo of the door rattled through the halls like a declaration of frustration. His shoes scuffed against the wooden floor as he walked in, his jaw clenched tight and his mismatched eyes cold with restrained anger. The cool air in the house felt colder than usual, and it wasn't until he heard the soft crunch beneath his feet that he realized the frost on the ground was his own doing. Ice had spread from his feet outward, crawling along the floor like creeping vines, freezing droplets forming along the baseboards of the walls. His hands were trembling, not from fear, not from exhaustion, but from the tension that had been building in him since the end of the quirk apprehension test. Izuku Midoriya. The name alone was like a splinter in his mind, nagging, sharp, and impossible to ignore. He had never even heard of the guy before. Not in any underground talk, not in any of his father's circles, not even in public records. And yet there he was, blowing away the entire class, outshining them all without even breaking a sweat. The ball throw, the sprint, the grip machine. Every result had been a number that felt fake, unreal, ridiculous. Shoto clenched his fists again and felt a slight frost gather around his knuckles. He was holding back. That was what infuriated him most. It wasn't even his full strength. It was like the boy didn't want to embarrass the rest of them, and yet he still came out on top. For the first time in years, Shoto felt something that reminded him of inadequacy. It didn't burn the same way it used to when his father pushed him too hard. This wasn't about expectations being forced on him. This was about him realizing someone his age had power so vast, so effortless, that even if Shoto used both ice and fire, he still might not win. His fingers twitched. He couldn't think like that. He wouldn't use his flames. He refused to use them. That side of him, the side that came from his father, had no place in the life he was trying to build. He would prove to everyone that he didn't need that power. He didn't need him. But the more he repeated that to himself, the more hollow it sounded. Shoto. The voice was soft, concerned. He blinked and looked up. His sister, Fuyumi, stood at the edge of the kitchen, wearing a powder blue apron with little floral patterns. A wooden spoon was in her hand, and she was glancing at the frost spreading across the floor with a raised brow. Fuyumi, don't seem to be in a good mood, she said gently. Fuyumi, you've got ice all over the place. He looked down again. The floor around him shimmered with cold, his breath lightly visible in the air. Shoto, I didn't mean, he muttered. Fuyumi gave a small smile and stepped toward him, her slippers crunching against the frozen wood. Fuyumi, that's okay. It's been a while since you lost control like that, though. Something happened. He didn't answer at first. His fingers uncurled, then clenched again. The frost retreated slightly as he took a slow breath, but it didn't melt. It lingered like his thoughts. First day at UA, he finally said. She nodded. Fuyumi, right? You were looking forward to it. You said you were going to prove you didn't need to use your... Shoto, I didn't come first, he cut in. Fuyumi blinked. You didn't. He shook his head. Who did? Shoto, some kid. Izuku Midoriya, he said the name with deliberate control, trying to keep the cold out of his voice. Shoto, he was in the entrance exam too. I noticed him then. Didn't think much of it. Is he in your class? Shoto gave a short nod. Yeah. Fuyumi walked back into the kitchen and stirred the pot she was working on. Fuyumi, well, maybe he's just really good. What's his quirk? Shoto, that's the thing. Shoto's eyes darkened as he stared out the window, the fading light of the afternoon catching the frost on the glass. Shoto, he said, it's something like photosynthesis. He absorbs solar energy and turns it into strength. He broke every record in the test. But... Shoto, he was holding back. The words were heavy, like lead on his tongue. Shoto, I saw it. The way he moved. He wasn't serious. He didn't even care about the results. And he still came first. Fuyumi raised an eyebrow, but her voice remained calm. Fuyumi, that must have been tough to see. He gritted his teeth again. Shoto, do you know what it means, Fuyumi? That even if I used everything, even if I used the fire I swore I wouldn't rely on, I still might not be enough. She stirred the pot in silence for a moment, then turned off the stove and looked at him fully. Fuyumi, so what if you're not? She said quietly. He blinked. What? 𝗵𝗃𝗻𝗲, so what if you're not enough right now? She said again, walking over to him. 𝗵𝗃𝗻𝗲, that doesn't mean you never will be. And it doesn't mean that using your full strength makes you a failure. 𝗧𝗲𝗧𝗏, it's not about strength, he snapped, then paused, his voice dropping. 𝗧𝗲𝗧𝗏, it's about him. I don't want to be like him. I know, she said gently. 𝗵𝗃𝗻𝗲, but you're not him. You never were. That power's yours too, 𝗧𝗲𝗧𝗏. Not just his. And if using it gives you a chance to grow stronger, to protect others, then maybe. It's time to start seeing it as a part of you, not a part of him. He looked away, eyes falling back on the icy floor. 𝗵𝗃𝗻𝗲, he didn't even act like it was a big deal. He was shy, quiet, like he didn't realize he'd just outclassed everyone. That makes it worse somehow. 𝗵𝗃𝗻𝗲 placed a hand on his arm. 𝗵𝗃𝗻𝗲, maybe he doesn't see you as a rival yet. He scoffed. Thanks. 𝗵𝗃𝗻𝗲, no, I mean, maybe that's an opportunity. You don't have to hate him, 𝗧𝗲𝗧𝗏. You can learn from him. Push yourself further. Just like I know you will. You've always been stubborn, but you're not cold. Not really. 𝗧𝗲𝗧𝗏 didn't answer. His eyes stayed on the frost. Then, slowly the air warmed just a little, and the thin ice began to melt beneath their feet. 𝗧𝗲𝗧𝗏, I'm not going to use my flames, he said again, quieter this time. 𝗧𝗲𝗧𝗏, not until I choose to. Not because I have to. I'm going to beat him. With my own strength. Back to the main character, 𝗵𝗃𝗻𝗲 smiled and ruffled his hair lightly. Then do that. Show him your strength, little brother. And when the time comes, maybe. Just maybe. Show him your heart too. I locked the door behind me and stood in the quiet of my one-bedroom apartment for a few seconds, letting the silence settle. It was almost too quiet compared to the noise and energy of you. The hum of the city was distant, muffled by thick walls and the double-pane window. My backpack dropped to the floor with a thud that echoed more than it should have. I toed off my shoes and rubbed my neck. Today was a lot. My first day at U. Hi. It still didn't feel real. I'd dreamt about it for so long that even as I stood in the middle of my small apartment, a part of me was waiting for the dream to end. But it hadn't. Not when I walked through the school gates. Not when I met my homeroom teacher, Aziawa-sensei. Not even when I stood on the field and went through the quirk apprehension test. I still couldn't believe how it went. I had planned to hold back. And I did. Mostly. Enough not to make a scene. But even holding back, I could feel the difference. The power was there, like a sun burning under my skin, humming softly in my chest and waiting to be used. It had become so natural I almost forgot there was a time I didn't have it. Even the smallest effort now did what I couldn't have even imagined a year ago. And the others? They looked at me. Not with disgust. Not with pity. But with curiosity. Respect. Some even smiled at me like we were already friends. That was the strangest part. I wandered into the kitchen and opened the fridge. I didn't have to eat anymore. My quirk took care of almost. My body ran perfectly due to solar energy. But I still liked food. The smell, the warmth, the act of making something with my hands. I missed it. So tonight I was going to cook something. Not because I needed to, but because I wanted to. I grabbed some vegetables and leftover chicken from the fridge and got to work. The knife chopped rhythmically against the cutting board. The sizzle of oil hitting the pan followed. I lost myself in the motions with chop, stir, flip. It felt familiar. The celebration, I thought, smiling a little. For the first time in over 10 years, I had friends. The realization stopped me for a moment. My hand paused over the pan, the spoon dripping sauce onto the stove. I really had friends. I didn't know what changed. Maybe it was the school. Maybe it was me. Maybe I finally stopped trying to apologize for existing. But today, when I talked to Achiko, when I laughed at Siro's joke, when I spoke to Tsuyu and actually talked to her without I felt like I belonged. The phone buzzed on the counter. I wiped my hands on a towel and picked it up. 17 unread messages. I blinked. That couldn't be right. I opened them. Group chat. 1A meme Lord Siro, yo Midoriya, you got hops bro Kaminari, for real though that jumped during the test. You sure you didn't come from Krypton? 1 Tsuyu, you were very impressive Midoriya Achiko, your landing was so cool. I thought you were gonna float for a second. 𝗧𝗵𝗲, you wield power with subtle restraint. An admirable trait. Shoji, we should train sometime. I'd like to see how your quirk works more closely. Kirishima, man, you gotta show me how you did that grip strength thing. That was unbreakable. I stood there staring at the screen, reading through each one like they were written in another language. Not because I didn't understand them, but because I wasn't used to reading things like that. Words meant for me. Words that weren't cruel or mocking or backhanded. Friendly. I typed back a quick message, trying not to sound too stiff. Midoriya, thanks guys, you were all amazing too. I'm lucky to be in 1A with you all. I hovered over the send button, rereading the message at least 4 times. Then I pressed it and placed the phone down like it might explode. The pan hissed behind me, reminding me I was cooking. I stirred the contents and let the scent of soy and ginger fill the air. It reminded me of home. Mom used to make this dish when I had a good day, when things were still good between us. There weren't many of those, but when they happened, she always made sure I remembered them. I wondered what she would say if she saw me now the food was done. I plated it and carried it to the small table in the corner of my room. I didn't even turn on the TV. I just sat there, slowly eating, listening to the city outside my window. My phone buzzed again. Another message. Achiko, hey, what's your favorite snack? I want to bring something tomorrow. I smiled before I could stop myself. Midoriya, I like anything with katsudon. Why? Achiko, just asking. Grinning face, with smiling eyes. I shook my head and kept eating. For the first time in years, the food tasted better. The room and my phone. Well, it had never been this loud. It had been a few days since the quirk apprehension test, and already I could feel it. The eyes. Not just from my classmates, but from the faculty. Maybe it was the records I unknowingly broke, or maybe it was the fact that no one had any idea who I was before I showed up and placed first. Either way, the attention wasn't something I liked. Not really. My quirk gives me enhanced hearing, and that's not always a blessing. I could hear whispers, murmurs echoing in the staff lounge even when I was walking down the hall 2 floors below. They said things like, that one student, another powerhouse. I heard he's even stronger than Endeavor's kid. I hated it. I wish I could have just blended in. But then again, it wasn't all bad. Somehow, even in this storm of attention, I'd found something strange, something I never had before. Friends. The word itself still felt foreign when I thought it, like tasting a new flavor I wasn't quite sure I liked until I went for a second bite. But now, I think I'm getting addicted. The loneliness I'd grown so used to had started to fade. It was almost frightening how quickly I adapted to not being alone. Achiko and Tsuyu had become constant presences, always around, always checking in, even when I tried to keep to myself. Then Mina and Toru started dragging me into their conversations too. Their energy was overwhelming at times. Mina especially talked like her thoughts moved faster than her mouth could handle, and Toru always had a way of sneaking up and saying something that made everyone laugh. I wasn't used to that kind of vibe, but I welcomed it. They made it feel okay to relax, even when my guard was always up. The guys were a mixed bag. Kaminari was friendly, kind of an airhead, but fun. Zero was cool in that chill older brother way. Kirishima had this infectious energy about him, always talking about manliness and honor like we were in some kind of old samurai film. They talked to me, laughed with me, made jokes that didn't punch down. I was still learning how to respond, how to trust that it wasn't a trap. And then, there was Bakugo. And Todoroki. I could feel their stares. Bakugo's was filled with the same barely contained fury he always carried, like he was waiting for an excuse to explode. And Todoroki's, cold, analytical, curious, like he was trying to figure me out. I tried not to meet either of their eyes, even though, with my X-ray vision, I could sense them every time they looked in my direction. It felt weirdly invasive, and I had X-ray vision. So that's saying something. We were all in class, lounging before the next PRD. Kaminari, who'd been spinning his pen between his fingers, suddenly asked, Kaminari, so you guys know who's gonna be teaching the combat classes? Everyone perked up at that. I hadn't heard anything definitive, but I did hear something from the teacher's office, something about a major pro hero coming in. I thought about sharing that, but I stayed quiet. Talking too much made me feel exposed. 𝗧𝗏, I bet it's Eraserhead 𝗧𝗏 guessed. 𝗧𝗏, he's our homeroom teacher, right? Kirishima, nah, I heard it's someone different, Kirishima added, crossing his arms and leaning back. Someone big. Mina, I hope it's Mount Lady. Mina shouted. She's so cool. Toru, you're only saying that 'cause you hope she lets you take selfies with her, Toru said, laughing. Mina, she's an influencer and a hero. That's talent. As the chatter continued, I was still tuning out a conversation from the faculty hallway 4 floors away, something about security detail, costume requests, and a showy entrance. The moment I heard that last part, I had a suspicion. And then the classroom doors slammed open. I am walking through the door like a normal person. A voice boomed with all the subtlety of a thunderclap. Heads turned. All of them. Standing in the doorway, bright as a billboard and twice as loud, was All Might in his full Silver Age costume, striking a familiar pose. His presence filled the room like a solar flare, bright and blinding. Gasps rippled across the classroom like a wave. It's All Might. Kirishima shouted. No way. Kaminari's jaw dropped. He's gonna be our teacher. Is this even allowed? 𝗧𝗏 whispered. I thought he only did guest appearances, Tsuyu murmured, tilting her head. Achiko, is that his Silver Age costume? Even Ida stood up. Lida, to think the symbol of peace would be involved directly in our education. We are truly honored. They were all thrilled. All of them. I was quiet. Very quiet. Because the old me, the me who spent years dreaming, crying, reaching out for something just out of reach, that Izuku would have screamed with joy, maybe even cried at the idea of being taught by the hero he admired more than anyone else. But that Izuku was gone. Because this man, this towering symbol who now smiled and waved like a role model, once looked at me with cold eyes and told me to give up. That I couldn't be a hero without a quirk. That I should stop dreaming. He didn't even know me. Didn't ask. Just dismissed me. And that dismissal pushed me closer to the edge than anything else had. If my quirk hadn't activated right before I hit the ground, I wouldn't be here. No friends. No 𝐒𝐩𝐢𝐽. No second chance. So no. I didn't clap. I didn't cheer. I just looked away. Achiko noticed. She was sitting beside me and nudged my elbow gently. You okay? She whispered. I gave a nod. Just once. But my eyes never left my desk. All Might stepped forward into the classroom. All Might, young heroes. I hope you're all ready, because I am here. Not just to inspire but to instruct. He pointed toward the monitor at the front of the room. All Might, your combat training begins now. Follow me to ground beta. The class erupted in cheers and excitement, rushing to grab their bags and follow after him. I stood up slower than the rest. I could still feel the weight in my chest, a storm of feelings I hadn't figured out how to name. But I walked forward anyway. If I could survive my worst day, I could survive this. Before we left the room, All Might stopped near the front, tapping a few buttons on the wall console. A large panel slid open, revealing a small drawer filled with neatly folded suits and gear. All Might, here they are, he announced, grinning. All Might, your designated costumes based on the requests you submitted before school began. Wear them with pride. The class cheered again, rushing forward to grab their respective cases. I watched them all. Excited. Hopeful. I walked toward mine slowly, wondering what I'd find inside. The locker room was buzzing with excitement, everyone fidgeting with their costumes and admiring each other's designs. As I stepped out of the changing area and into the light, I caught my reflection in the glass. The suit fit me like it had been forged around my body, deep blue as the base, accented with streaks of red and a touch of orange tracing along my limbs and chest, drawing the eye toward the core. Armored plates hugged my shoulders, forearms, and legs, dark matte material shaped for both mobility and protection. The boots felt solid beneath me, grounded, and the gloves flexed easily with my fingers. A white cape flowed behind me, the inner lining gleaming with a soft teal shimmer. It looked regal, powerful, like a hero from a comic book stepped into reality. I stared at myself for a long second, watching the cape shift ever so slightly as I turned. I hadn't designed this. Not exactly. The draft I submitted had been vague practical. Nothing flashy. This felt like someone had looked into my soul and given form to what I could be. What I should be. 𝗓𝗓𝗏 𝗏 Midoriya. You look like a boss. 𝗓𝗓𝗏 called out as he passed, punching my shoulder lightly. 𝗧𝗏, didn't think you had it in you, man, 𝗧𝗏 added with a grin. Even Mina gave a whistle as she spun around in her pink and black gear. One Mina. Okay, fashion king. That cape. You're making the rest of us look underdressed. I just gave a sheepish nod, unsure how to respond. The attention made me uneasy, even if it was positive. I scanned the rest of the class. 𝐒𝐻𝐿 wore a round, glossy glossy 5 pink and black suit with a helmet hanging behind her. Tsuyu's skin-tight green suit highlighted her frog features. Kaminari looked ready to rock in his black jacket and lightning bolts. Iida's armor glinted with engine pipes on his calves. 𝗵𝘃𝗲. His suit was all grenades and aggression, just like him. Everyone looked like they belonged on a magazine cover or a real battlefield. Still, mine felt different. It didn't just scream, hero. It whispered, remember who you are. All Might stood at the far end of training field beta, hands on his hips, watching us gather. The large mock urban environment behind him loomed with its broken windows, fake rubble, and towering concrete buildings. The air was heavy with anticipation. Good. All Might called, clapping his hands once. All Might, you all look splendid. Heroes in training, reporting for duty. We lined up before him, our eyes wide with expectation. Even 𝗵𝘃𝗲 seemed focused, which was rare. This, All Might continued, All Might, is the first true test of your hero potential. Today we conduct combat training. More murmurs. A few fists pumped in the air. Some nervous laughter. The scenario is simple, he said, stepping aside to reveal a massive diagram on a hollow screen. The setting, an indoor battle. Villains have hidden a nuclear weapon in a building. The heroes must capture it or defeat the villains. You will be divided into 2 teams, heroes versus villains. A mix of excitement and nerves swept through the group. I looked toward 𝗓𝗃𝗏, who was bouncing on her toes, clearly eager. All Might stepped forward again. Each team will be 2 people. We drew lots to determine the matchups. He gestured to another screen as the matchups began flashing across it. Team A, Izuku Midoriya and 𝗓𝗃𝗏 Uraraka. Team B, Katsuki 𝗵𝘃𝗏 and Tenya Iida. Team C, Shoto Todoroki and Mina Ishido. Team D, Momo Yaoyorozu and Denki Kaminari. Team E, Tsuyu Azui and Fumikage Tokoyami. Team F, Eijiro Kirishima and Rikido Sato. Team G, Yuga Aoyama and Koji Kota. Team H, Mizo Shoji and Toru Hagakure. I froze the moment I saw the pairing. Me with 𝗓𝗃𝗏 versus 𝗵𝘃𝗏 and Iida. I felt the BLD rush to my temples. Are you okay? 𝗓𝗃𝗏 asked beside me, her voice low. Yeah, I said, not taking my eyes off the screen. Just ironic. All Might smiled. Team A will be the heroes. Team B, the villains. 𝗵𝘃𝗏 let out a dry chuckle, rolling his shoulders as he cracked his neck. This'll be over fast. For he didn't even look at me. Didn't need to. That familiar contempt rolled off him like smoke. Iida adjusted his glasses, upright and polite. Iida, I shall fulfill my villainous duties to the utmost of my ability. Let's do our best, Midoriya. But 𝗵𝘃𝗏 was already walking toward the building, snorting. 𝗵𝘃𝗏, don't get in my way, Four Eyes. 𝗵𝘃𝗏, do your best. Deku he threw over his shoulder with mock sweetness. 𝗵𝘃𝗏, try not to cry this time. I didn't react. I just kept my eyes locked on his back until he vanished into the building. 𝗓𝗃𝗏 frowned, sensing something brewing. 𝗓𝗃𝗏, you know, you don't have to prove anything to him, she said. Izuku, I'm not proving anything to him, I replied. Izuku, I'm showing him he doesn't control me anymore. When I turned to All Might, something must have flashed in my eyes, because the smile he wore faltered for half a second. He knew. Maybe not the whole truth, but enough. All Might cleared his throat. All Might, now then. Team A, report to the monitor room. You'll have 10 minutes to plan your approach before entry. Team B has 5 minutes to set up their defense. 𝗧𝗃𝗃 and I nodded and began walking toward the monitor building. My cape fluttered behind me, brushing against my legs as I moved. Midoriya. All Might's voice was quieter now as I passed. I paused but didn't look at him. "You've grown," he said. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Third-person view inside the dim glow of the monitor room, Izuku stood before the screen, eyes flickering rapidly as if processing 1,000 calculations a second. 𝗧𝗃𝗃 hovered beside him, shifting from foot to foot, eyes flicking from the blueprint to Izuku's face. He didn't blink. He was completely still, lips barely moving as he muttered every corridor, every wall, every stairwell. "Izuku, I've scanned the whole structure," Izuku said calmly, his tone clinical. "Izuku, Bakugo and Iida are on the 4th floor. Bakugo is positioned in the west wing, likely anticipating a direct confrontation. Iida is stationed by the bomb, top central chamber, 3 corridors down past the atrium." 𝗧𝗃𝗃 blinked. 𝗧𝗃𝗃, "Wait, how did you dash?" "Izuku, I used X-ray mode while the countdown was starting," he cut in. "Izuku, the building's reinforced but not enough to block my vision for long. I saw their placements, body posture, pacing patterns. Iida is guarding, Bakugo is hunting. He's not waiting. He wants a fight. So what do we do?" Izuku turned to her, finally blinking. "Izuku, you'll go in from the eastern access, under the maintenance duct. There's a vent system that leads directly above Iida's location. Use your quirk to float down silently and secure the weapon. He'll be too distracted monitoring the hallway. If he hears anything, I'll already be making enough noise to draw them both." 𝗧𝗃𝗃 hesitated. "𝗧𝗃𝗃, you're going in alone." Izuku looked back at the screen. "Izuku, yes. Let him come to me." All Might's voice rang through the speakers. "All Might, heroes, you may now enter the battlefield." Without a word, Izuku turned, cape dragging across the floor as he walked. 10 minutes later, the heavy doors to the building opened with a mechanical hiss, and Izuku stepped inside. The halls were dark, dust floating in the air, fake debris strewn across the tile. His boots echoed with each step. The air was still, but the tension in it coiled like a spring. Somewhere above, Bakugo waited, crouched in the dark like a predator. "Deku." The voice tore through the silence, violent and desperate. A blast erupted from above, shattering the ceiling as Bakugo dropped through it with an explosion, palm already primed. Izuku didn't flinch. Bakugo crashed down, a shockwave of heat and force exploding outward. The smoke parted in seconds, and there was Izuku standing unburned. Unmoving. Bakugo grinned like a wild animal. "Bakugo, what's the matter, scared stiff?" Izuku took a single step forward. The ground beneath cracked slightly. Bakugo lunged, explosions flaring from both hands. He flew at Izuku like a missile, screaming as his gauntlets let loose a roar. Fire and smoke engulfed the hall as he released a massive burst straight into Izuku's chest. But the smoke cleared too quickly. Izuku stood in the middle of the corridor, cape fluttering in the wind created by the blast. There wasn't a scorch mark on him. Bakugo's grin faltered. "Izuku, still using the same patterns," Izuku said flatly. Izuku, still leading with. "You're right, still telegraphing every strike. You're slower than I remember, you cocky little dash." Izuku was already moving. A blur of motion. His hand planted firmly on Bakugo's chest. No quirk, no wind-up. Just raw force. Then he pushed. Bakugo was ripped off the ground, shot backward like a cannonball. His body blasted through one wall, then another and another. Concrete shattered. Metal bent and collapsed. He hit the far wall with a crunch and crumpled to the floor. For the entire class watching from the monitors gasped. "Did he just dash?" Kaminari started, jaw slack. "He didn't even flinch," Jiraiya said, eyes wide. "Midoriya's. Terrifying," whispered Yaoyorozu. "Tokoyami, such precision," Tokoyami murmured. "Tokoyami." He analyzed Bakugo's entire style and dismantled him without breaking a sweat. From beside them, Todoroki narrowed his eyes. "Todoroki, that wasn't luck. That was Demps." Even All Might's eyes flickered with unease. He remained silent, but his jaw was tense. Inside the building, Bakugo groaned and rose, coughing through the dust. To Bakugo, he fired off a desperate blast to gain height, launching himself back at Izuku, rage boiling in his eyes. Izuku was walking toward him calmly, shoulders relaxed. Bakugo screamed as he launched another barrage, explosions lighting up the halls in bursts of flame and thunder. But Izuku kept walking. Through every blast, through every shockwave, the smoke parted only to reveal him again and again, untouched. Bakugo hurled a grenade, an oversized one from his gauntlet. Izuku batted it aside like it was nothing. The explosion rocked the wall to the left, but he didn't even look. Izuku, you always fight like this, he said as he approached. Izuku, brute force. Screaming. Exploding everything you see. But it's shallow. Predictable. You never evolved. Shut up. Another blast. Another dodge. Izuku didn't even blink. Izuku, you never cared to learn anything else, Izuku continued, stepping forward again. Izuku, because everyone told you that you were the best. You believed it. So you never changed. Never adapted. And now look at you. Bakugo's foot landed with a thunderous kick. Izuku caught it effortlessly. Izuku, all that anger. And still powerless to stop me. He slammed Bakugo downward, face first into the tile. The floor cracked. Izuku stood over him, eyes cold and sharp. Izuku, you're not my rival, he whispered. Bakugo growled, pushing up with one arm, teeth gritted. Bakugo, you think you're better than me? No, Izuku said. I know I am. He turned away, letting Bakugo slump against the wreckage of the floor. From the upper floor, Achiko's voice rang through the comms. Achiko, I got the weapon. Mission complete. All Might's voice buzzed in through the speaker a moment later, full of tension. H-Hero team wins. The monitor room erupted in murmurs, but the awe was almost palpable. Tsuyu tilted her head. Tsuyu, Midoriya-kun. Isn't he supposed to be nice? One Kirishima scratched the back of his neck. Kirishima, that wasn't just a win. That was a demolition. Mina, he didn't just defeat Bakugo, Mina said. He broke him. All Might stepped away from the screen, his smile gone, posture rigid. Hope you guys like this battle scene. This is my first one-on-one. The training had ended. The simulated city lay in quiet ruin, walls scorched and ceilings broken, remnants of a battle that had clearly left an impression on everyone present. Silence lingered as the last echoes of All Might's voice faded, his words hanging in the air like the settling dust. Students filtered out one by one, gathering in small groups, their eyes drawn repeatedly to the center figure of it all. Izuku Midoriya stood there quietly beside Achiko, his posture relaxed, yet the intensity of his earlier actions still clung to him like a shadow. His hero costume, only slightly scuffed, caught the lingering light filtering through the wide windows, giving him an almost unreal appearance in contrast to the more heavily bruised and battered students. Bakugo walked off first, his boots striking the floor sharply with each step. He didn't speak. His face was set in a grim line, eyes narrowed beneath furrowed brows. His shoulders were stiff with tension, hands buried deep into his pockets, fingers twitching as if he were barely holding himself back from igniting the air around him. Not one explosion. Not a single word of anger. That was the most unnerving thing of all. Kaminari glanced after him, looking uneasy. Kaminari, he's really mad, Kaminari said under his breath, scratching the back of his head. Kaminari, I've never seen him that quiet before. One Kirishima frowned slightly. Kirishima, that's not just mad. That's something else. He got wrecked back there. Zero. He didn't even stand a chance, Zero added quietly, arms folded. Zero, it's hard to believe Midoriya's really that strong. He wasn't even sweating. Shoto Todoroki stood a little apart from the rest, his hands in his pockets, gazing in the direction where Bakugo had disappeared. His expression was unreadable, but there was a faint crease between his brows, as if deep in thought. His gaze flicked to Izuku, watching him the way someone would watch an opponent they didn't yet understand. Just how strong are you really? The unspoken question hung between them, though neither said a word. Shoto knew Bakugo had been serious. And even then, Izuku had made it look like nothing. All Might clapped his hands together, drawing attention back to the front of the training hall. His voice, while still holding its usual larger-than-life energy, carried a clearer undertone of genuine praise. All Might, excellent work, everyone. All Might announced, arms spread wide. All Might, today's training exercise is officially concluded. You all did your best, but there's no denying Team A's performance was outstanding. There were a few nods, a few quiet murmurs of agreement, but almost everyone's eyes inevitably shifted toward Izuku once again. He stood still as the words washed over him, giving nothing away in his expression except a slight nod of acknowledgement. Achiko, standing beside him, rubbed her arm awkwardly but smiled, her cheeks flushed pink. Achiko, hee. We just got lucky, she said softly, though it was clear no one really believed that. Mina leaned toward Toru, both girls whispering behind slightly cupped hands. Mina, Midoriya really is cool, Mina admitted with a small grin. Mina, did you see him just walk through Bakugo's explosions like it was nothing? Toru giggled faintly, voice a soft murmur. Toru, I thought he'd get hit or dodge or something, but no, he didn't even flinch. That was crazy. Tsuyu blinked slowly, tilting her head in that calm way she always did. Tsuyu, he's not just strong. Said he. Like he already knew how it was going to end. Yaoyorozu stepped closer, her tone more serious as she adjusted her costume gloves. One Momo, it wasn't just raw power. Midoriya's strategy was precise. He directed Uraraka perfectly while controlling the entire situation himself. That level of awareness isn't something you learn overnight. Even Jiro, who rarely got flustered, tapped her earjacks thoughtfully. Jiro, guess the quiet guys really are hiding something sometimes. As the students continued to talk, All Might's voice softened, less for the crowd now and more directed specifically at Izuku. Midoriya, he said with a small smile, his shadow looming large but somehow subdued, All Might, excellent composure and restraint out there. You've clearly worked hard. That was a textbook example of what it means to be a hero. Izuku didn't look up right away. He simply nodded once more, hands relaxed by his sides, his eyes lowered slightly as though considering something far away. Izuku, thank you, All Might, he answered, his voice quiet but clear. If anyone had been expecting some sort of excited outburst from him, it didn't come. No shining grin, no triumphant shout. Just calm acceptance. Behind him, Achiko glanced over with a small crease in her brows, as though sensing that difference in him too. But she said nothing for now. The class slowly began to break up, students heading toward the locker rooms to change back into their uniforms, their chatter following them like a low tide of energy and curiosity still swirling around Midoriya's performance. But the atmosphere wasn't loud or overwhelming. It was steady, respectful, a recognition of something beyond ordinary. As Izuku walked at the back of the group, eyes lowered, he caught snippets of conversation here and there with his enhanced hearing. Kaminari, do you think he's got some kind of hidden training? Kaminari asked aloud. Kaminari, like maybe he's been doing secret stuff before you, eh? Kirishima, I don't know, Kirishima replied, voice thoughtful. Kirishima, but honestly, that's the kind of strength I want to reach someday too. Shoto remained silent, falling into step a few paces behind the rest, hands still in his pockets, his eyes flickering toward Izuku once more. At the front, All Might stood watching them all leave, his smile dimming slightly as his thoughts turned inward. Izuku's first-person view, what a day, I thought inwardly as I walked through the hallway, feeling the quiet weight of everything that had happened during training still lingering in my body like an echo. The school was quieter now, most students heading back to change or already gone. My footsteps echoed faintly against the polished floor, steady and calm. That was when I noticed it, floating school uniform sleeves and skirt fabric moving like there was someone wearing them. It wasn't hard to figure out who it was. Hey Toru, I said, my voice casual. The floating uniform paused for a moment before turning toward me. Hey Midoriya, she replied, sounding just as light-hearted as ever. The voice came from nowhere and everywhere at once, but I'd already grown used to it. We walked side by side for a while. I didn't mind the silence, but after a few seconds we started talking about the usual things, how the training exercise went, how crazy everything had been today. It felt normal, easier than I'd expected. I kept my eyes ahead mostly, hands in my pockets, letting my mind wander until my gaze drifted to her floating sleeves again. Without really thinking about it, I said, I didn't know, maybe it was curiosity. I wanted to see if I could see someone that's basically invincible, so I used my quirk, or basically my 𝐈𝐧𝐿. You know. Your hair is really appealing. The moment the words left my mouth, the uniform stopped moving entirely. I blinked, realizing a second too late what I'd just said. A pause stretched out between us, and then her voice broke it, small, quiet, and a little stunned. 𝗬𝗓𝗧𝗔. You can see me. 𝗬𝗓's voice had lost its usual playful tone, sounding more hesitant now, almost disbelieving. I scratched the back of my head, glancing aside. 𝗧𝗑. I have different kinds of visio, I explained awkwardly. 𝗧𝗑, it's part of my quirk. X-ray vision, telescopic vision. That kind of thing. So, yeah, I can see you. Her voice came again, but softer this time, and not as easygoing. 𝗬𝗓, I didn't know that. Another pause. 𝗬𝗓, you can really see me. Really see me? There was a slight tremble in her voice. I felt my throat tighten a little, realizing maybe I'd said too much without thinking about how it might make her feel. I turned toward her fully now, standing still as the floating sleeves clenched faintly. 𝗧𝗑, I'm so sorry, I said quickly. 𝗧𝗑, I didn't mean to. I wasn't trying to make you uncomfortable. I swear, but her voice wasn't angry. It was something else entirely. Fragile. 𝗬𝗓, I don't even know what I look like. 𝗬𝗓 said quietly. 𝗬𝗓, since I was little, I've always been like this. Invisible, I was bullied a lot because of it. I can't see myself in the mirror. I don't know what my face really looks like. And now you can see me. Her words hit harder than I expected. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out at first. My mind felt slow, heavier than usual, like there was more weight on this moment than there should have been. 𝗧𝗑, I didn't mean to. I tried again, but she interrupted gently. It's okay, she said, her voice quivering just slightly, like she wasn't sure if it really was. 𝗬𝗓, it's weird, that's all. I always thought. Maybe it's better this way, not knowing. But now I can't stop wondering. She fell quiet after that, the floating sleeves rising up toward where her face would be, like she was hiding it. I stood there helplessly for a moment, unsure of what the right thing to say was. I wasn't good at things like this, at feelings, at knowing what people needed to hear when things got complicated. But I didn't want to walk away either. I finally said, lowering my voice so it wouldn't echo too loudly. 𝗧𝗑, if you want, I can describe it to you. There was silence again. Then a soft intake of breath. 𝗬𝗓, would do that? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. I nodded slowly. 𝗧𝗑, but only if you want me to. I don't want to make things harder for you. For a long moment, 𝗬𝗓 didn't say anything. Then, quietly, she stepped a little closer. The floating sleeves settled back down, hanging at her sides again. Okay, she said. 𝗬𝗓, just tell me, please. I took a quiet breath, glancing up at the empty air where I knew her face was. My vision adjusted automatically, switching modes the way it always did, layers of invisibility peeling back like mist clearing from glass. And there she was. 𝗬𝗓 𝐔𝐩𝐽. Soft green hair that fell just past her shoulders, lighter in color than most. Gentle eyes, a faint, natural flush on her cheeks. Her features were the kind of person that made you think of open windows and sunlight. It was strange seeing someone who didn't know what they looked like. Stranger still that I might be the only one who ever would. Stranger still that I might be the only one who ever would. 𝗧𝗑, you have green hair, I started slowly, choosing my words carefully. 𝗧𝗑, kind of a soft color. It suits you. Your eyes they're bright, like you're always smiling, even when you aren't. 𝗬𝗓 didn't say anything, but I could hear her breathing quietly. I kept going. 𝗧𝗑, your face is gentle. I don't really know how else to say it. Like you. Like someone easy to talk to. Another pause. Then finally she spoke, voice shaking just a little. 𝗬𝗓, thank you. Midoriya. I exhaled slowly, letting the tension in my chest ease. 𝗧𝗑, you're welcome. 𝗬𝗓 rushed off quickly, her footsteps light and fast as she disappeared down the hallway, leaving me standing there, unsure of what exactly had just happened. 1 second she was standing in front of me, and the next she was gone. I stared at the spot where her floating uniform had been, feeling a strange weight in my chest, like I'd said too much again or done something I wasn't supposed to. I wasn't sure if I should follow her or leave her alone. Before I could really decide, I heard footsteps coming from the opposite direction. I turned just in time to see 𝗧𝗠 and 𝐭𝐻𝑖ko walking up to me, both of them looking curious. "Izuku," 𝗧𝗠 said first, blinking her wide eyes at me. "𝗧𝗠, what was that all about, Ribbit?" "Yeah," 𝐭𝐻𝑖ko added with a light smile but clear curiosity in her voice. "𝗧𝗏𝑖ko, we were looking for you. Then we saw 𝗬𝗲 running off. Did something happen?" I rubbed the back of my neck, feeling awkward all over again. "Izuku." "Nothing bad," I said after a second. "Izuku, we were just talking, that's all." Found out that I can see her. Both of them blinked at me, clearly not understanding for a moment. Then 𝗧𝗏𝑖ko tilted her head slightly. "You mean?" "Izuku, because of my quirk," I explained, letting out a quiet breath. "Izuku, my well supervision. I can see through things. So, I can see 𝗬𝗲. Like, completely." 𝗬𝗲's eyes widened a little more, but as usual, she didn't look too surprised, just thoughtful. 𝗧𝗏𝑖ko, on the other hand, looked like she didn't quite know what to say. "Izuku, I don't know what I did to her," I added, lowering my voice as I leaned back against the wall. "Izuku, she felt different. Like it really hit her. I wasn't trying to make her upset or anything, but..." I let my words trail off, not really sure how to finish that thought. 𝗧𝗠 put a hand on her hip, looking at me with her usual calm expression. "𝗧𝗠, Izuku, you're basically the first person to ever see her," she said, her voice even but with a little more softness than usual. "𝗧𝗠, I mean, that would be a lot for anyone. Especially for someone like 𝗬𝗲." "Yeah," 𝗧𝗏𝑖ko agreed, nodding quickly. "𝗧𝗏𝑖ko, I can't even imagine what that must feel like. She's been invisible her whole life, right? Not even seeing herself in a mirror. And then, suddenly, you come along and just see her." I looked down at my hand, flexing my fingers slowly, thinking about what they said. I hadn't really thought about it like that before. For me, my vision was just a thing my quirk did. It wasn't something I'd ever thought of as anything special enough to impact someone's life. But for 𝗬𝗲, it was completely different. It wasn't just a quirk feature. It was something that touched a part of her life no one else could. "Izuku, maybe I shouldn't have said anything," I said quietly, mostly to myself. "Izuku, maybe it would have been better if I just kept it to myself." "𝗧𝗏𝑖ko, I don't think so," 𝗧𝗏𝑖ko said, stepping a little closer. Her voice was gentle now. "𝗧𝗏𝑖ko, I think it probably scared her a little. But it probably meant something too. You didn't mean any harm by it, right?" "Of course not," I answered immediately. "𝗧𝗏𝑖ko, then I'm sure she'll realize that," 𝗧𝗏𝑖ko said, giving me a small smile. "𝗧𝗏𝑖ko, it might just take her a little time to process everything." 𝗧𝗠 nodded beside her. "𝗧𝗠, she'll talk to you again when she's ready. That's how these things work." I exhaled slowly and gave them both a quiet nod. For a moment, none of us said anything more, the hallway falling into a calm silence again. It was strange how even small things like this could feel heavier than combat training or school exercises. Dealing with people. It wasn't as straightforward as learning how to fight or string your quirk. "Izuku, thanks, both of you," I said after a moment. "For listening." 𝗧𝗏𝑖ko waved a hand with an easy smile. "𝗧𝗏𝑖ko, anytime. We're friends, right?" 𝗧𝗠 gave a small ribbit and a nod. "𝗧𝗠, that's what friends are for." I smiled a little at that. Friends. It was still a new concept for me, but I was starting to get used to the idea. Talking like this, sharing things like this. It felt kind of nice. "𝗧𝗠, we should get back before the others wonder where we went," 𝗧𝗠 added, glancing down the hallway. "Yeah," I agreed, standing up straight again. "Let's go." The three of us walked side by side back toward the changing rooms. As we walked, I couldn't help glancing over my shoulder once, wondering where 𝗬𝗲 had gone. I wasn't sure when she'd talk to me again, but I knew I'd wait. I owed her that much. With 𝗵𝗃𝗲 sat on one of the benches in the locker room long after everyone else had cleared out, his hands clenched into tight fists on his knees, knuckles pale from how hard he was gripping them. His head was lowered, eyes burning holes into the floor, not even really seeing it. His mind was running in endless circles, spiraling deeper and deeper as he replayed the entire battle in his head. Over and over again, Izuku walking through his explosions like they were nothing. That cold look in Izuku's eyes. No panic, no hesitation, not even a flicker of effort. He had pushed Bakugo through several walls with nothing but a single push to the chest. One moment. One move. He didn't even get serious. He didn't even break a sweat. Bakugo's teeth ground together hard enough that his jaw ached. It wasn't supposed to be like this. It couldn't be like this. The worthless, quirkless Deku. That was who he was supposed to be. That's what he'd always been. And now Deku was looking down at him from so high up that Bakugo couldn't even see where he was anymore. A low growl rumbled in his throat as he slammed his fist against the bench, making it creak under the force. His heart felt like it was pounding too hard in his chest, like his BLD was made of fire that couldn't find a way out. But why was it Deku of all people? Why wasn't it him? The sound of footsteps echoed in the otherwise quiet room. Bakugo didn't bother looking up until he heard a familiar voice. "You're still here," Shoto said, stopping a few steps away from him. His voice was calm as always, but there was a trace of something else under it. Maybe curiosity. Maybe something colder. "Shoto, I thought you'd have left by now." Bakugo didn't answer. He didn't move. His hands stayed clenched. Shoto exhaled slowly through his nose, studying him. "Shoto, I watched the whole fight," he said. "You and Midoriya." That finally got a reaction. Bakugo's head jerked up, his eyes sharp with something between anger and pride so twisted it didn't know what to be anymore. "Bakugo, what the hell do you want, Todoroki?" he snapped, voice hoarse. Shoto didn't flinch. He just stood there, arms folded loosely over his chest. "Shoto, it seems there's a history between the two of you," he said after a brief pause. Bakugo's fists clenched tighter, if that was even possible. For a long moment, he didn't answer. His shoulders were tense like a drawn wire, ready to snap. "You don't know it," he muttered finally, voice low, almost a growl. "Shoto, I noticed it during the fight," Shoto continued, still steady, still calm. "Shoto, you weren't just trying to win. You wanted to prove something. Or maybe destroy something." His heterochromatic eyes flickered with quiet focus. Shoto, Midoriya didn't seem interested in either. Bakugo's laugh came out rough and broken, not like a real laugh at all. "Bakugo, of course he didn't," he spat, eyes burning again. "Bakugo, that bstrd. He doesn't even have to try anymore." His voice cracked on the last word, and he shut his mouth tight like he hated himself for letting that happen. Shoto stepped a little closer, lowering his arms. His tone didn't change. "Shoto, what exactly happened between you two?" For a long minute, Bakugo didn't speak. He just stared down at the floor again. His mind wasn't spiraling anymore. It wasn't moving. It felt stuck, trapped in a memory he didn't want to replay but couldn't stop from seeing. "Bakugo, since we were kids," Bakugo said at last, voice raw like it hurt to say it. "Bakugo, he was always there. Following me around. Looking up to me." His hands trembled slightly now. Bakugo, but he didn't have a quirk. Nothing. This useless look in his. And no matter how many times I told him he was worthless, he wouldn't quit. He let out a shaky breath. "Bakugo, I thought that meant I was better. Stronger." Shoto's expression didn't change, but he didn't interrupt either. "And now?" Bakugo's head lowered even more, almost like he couldn't bear the weight of his own thoughts. "Bakugo, now he's looking down at me. Like I'm nothing." "Shoto, you think Midoriya sees you like that?" Shoto asked quietly. Bakugo's mouth twisted into a grimace. "Bakugo, don't pretend like you don't see it. You saw what happened. I gave everything I had and he just walked through it. Like it didn't matter." His voice dropped even lower, bitter and sharp. "It didn't matter." Shoto was silent for a moment before he spoke again. "Shoto, that must be difficult." Bakugo's eyes snapped up, his gaze wild. "Difficult?" Shoto didn't flinch. "Shoto, you built yourself on being the best. I can see that he tilted his head slightly. Shoto, but now you're forced to face someone even higher. That's not something everyone can handle. Bakugo let out another rough laugh, one that almost sounded like a snarl. Bakugo, so what? You here to rub it in? No. Shoto shook his head. Shoto, I just wanted to see it for myself. To understand, his voice was still as calm as ever, but there was a cool honesty in it that Bakugo couldn't ignore. Shoto, and I wanted to know how much further I need to go. Bakugo stared at him for a second, then snorted, looking away. You too, huh? Shoto didn't answer that directly. Instead, after a pause, he said, Shoto, you'll have to decide what you're going to do next. Stay angry, or figure out how to catch up. Bakugo's fists slowly unclenched. His breathing was still rough, but quieter now. He didn't say anything else. Shoto didn't press further. After a few seconds, he simply turned and walked toward the exit. Plus Shoto, see you later, Bakugo Shoto said as he left. Bakugo sat there a little longer, staring down at his hands. His mind wasn't spiraling quite as fast anymore. But it wasn't still either. It was moving in a new direction now. One he didn't know the end of yet. The next morning carried a strange quiet as I walked toward 𝐎𝐻𝐢𝐵 main gates, hands in my pockets, bags slung over my shoulder. There wasn't really anything that set today apart in my mind until I saw a crowd of reporters gathered right outside the entrance. It wasn't one or two of them either. There were full-on camera crews, people with microphones, notebooks, and even drones floating overhead trying to get a better shot. I slowed my steps a little as the sea of adults turned their attention toward me like I'd just stepped into a spotlight. There he is, one of them called, voice loud enough to carry over the general murmur. In an instant they surrounded me. Microphones came up. Cameras flashed. Questions were thrown from every direction. Midoriya is Izuku, correct? Is it true All Might teaches at you? Now. What's his training regimen like? Their voices overlapped. I barely had time to answer one before another pushed through. I took a step back instinctively, trying to put some kind of distance between myself and the barrage of questions. A mic bumped against my chin. Someone else's camera lens nearly clipped my shoulder. I clenched my jaw slightly, glancing toward the school gate as if that would somehow offer a way out. No luck. They were right up against the property line, probably using every loophole they could to avoid officially trespassing. Izuku, this is way too much. I muttered under my breath. I could sue for this. Before I could seriously consider trying to force my way through the crowd or just phase through them entirely, a familiar voice rang out, calm and sharp enough to cut through the noise. That's enough. The reporters collectively stiffened. I turned my head and saw Aizawa-sensei standing there, eyes half-lidded but carrying that same constant weight of authority he always had. His scarf hung loose around his neck as he walked forward, gaze sweeping over the crowd like they were an annoyance rather than actual people. Aizawa, this is school property, he said evenly. Aizawa, if you step 1 foot past that line, it counts as trespassing and you will take legal action. I suggest you leave. The reporters backed up a little, their questions turning into quiet murmurs. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding and straightened my posture. Izuku, thanks for the assist, Aizawa-sensei. He gave me a slight nod, glancing at me just briefly before turning back toward the building. Midoriya, get to class. Yes, sir. I followed after him, walking through the gates and finally leaving the crowd behind. The halls were quiet compared to outside, and the moment I stepped into 1A's classroom, the normal energy returned. People were chatting, leaning against desks, reviewing notebooks. Kaminari and Kirishima were arguing about which pro hero had the best theme song. Mina and Toru were giggling about something, while Shoto sat in his seat by the window, arms crossed as usual. As I slid into my desk, Uraraka leaned over with a small smile. Achiko, you okay, Midoriya? Saw all the reporters outside. Yeah, I said, rubbing the back of my head. Izuku, it's kind of overwhelming, honestly. Kaminari, that's what happens when you're the class golden boy now, Kaminari chimed in, grinning. Kaminari, that fight with Bakugo really made people notice you. To Izuku, can we not call me that? I said, voice a little too quiet for my own liking. Before the conversation could stretch any further, 𝗧𝗓 stood up from his seat, adjusting his glasses with his usual precise movements. 𝗧𝗓, everyone, please take your seats, he said loudly. 𝗧𝗓, homeroom is about to start. We mustn't waste time. Gradually, people listened. Even Kaminari and Kirishima sat down, though they kept exchanging glances like they wanted to keep talking. Aizawa-sensei walked in a few moments later, hands in his pockets, expression as unreadable as ever. Morning, he said flatly, eyes drifting across the room. Aizawa, you've all seen the media circus outside. Get used to it. As students training to become pro heroes, this is something you'll deal with. Public attention is part of the job. There were a few murmurs in response. Mina leaned toward Jairu, whispering something that made the other girl roll her eyes in quiet amusement. Aizawa continued. Aizawa, now, we have something else to settle today. Class leadership. That got everyone's attention. Heads turned. Conversations stopped. Leadership. Kaminari repeated. That's right, Aizawa said. Aizawa, we need a class president and a vice president. They'll handle minor administrative tasks, help coordinate class decisions, and represent 1A during official events. People started looking around at each other, whispering and guessing. Ida's hand twitched against his desk like he wanted to raise it immediately, but he held back. Aizawa held up a hand. Aizawa, we'll do this fairly. Everyone writes down one name for president and one for vice president. You can't vote for yourself. Once you're done, pass them forward. Sheets of paper were handed out. I stared down at mine for a second, tapping the pencil against my desk. President? I didn't really see myself as the type. After a moment, I quietly wrote Ida's name for president and Yaoyorozu for vice president. It just seemed like a good fit. When everyone finished, the papers were collected and handed to Aizawa-sensei. He tallied them without changing his expression. Once, flipping through the slips of paper until he reached the last one. The results are in, he said, voice steady. Class president, Midoriya. I blinked, frozen for a second. Around me, the class started reacting all at once. Kaminari, seriously. Midoriya. Kaminari said, eyes wide. Mina, wow, didn't expect that, Mina added, glancing in my direction. Uraraka clapped her hands lightly. Achiko, congrats, Midoriya. Even Shoto gave me a quiet nod from his seat. I looked up slowly, mouth slightly open. Izuku, wait. Really? Aizawa. That's what the votes say, Aizawa confirmed. Aizawa, vice president goes to Yaoyorozu. Momo didn't look surprised at all. She simply folded her hands together in front of her desk and offered me a polite nod. Ida, meanwhile, sat with a stiff expression, his fingers drumming lightly against the desk like he was working through something in his head. Aizawa continued. Aizawa, Midoriya, Yaoyorozu, take your positions seriously. You'll be expected to handle extra responsibilities going forward. That's all for now. I swallowed, standing up slowly from my seat as everyone's attention shifted toward me again. It felt strange being the focus like this, not because of some battle, but because people had actually chosen me. Izuku. I really wasn't expecting this, I said, voice quiet at first. Izuku, but I'll do my best. Thank you. The class clapped, some more enthusiastic than others. Kaminari gave me a thumbs up. Kirishima grinned like he was genuinely happy for me. Even Tokoyami offered a small approving glance, his usual calm demeanor unchanged. As I sat back down, Ida leaned toward me slightly. Ida. Congratulations, Midoriya, he said, voice composed despite how he'd looked earlier. Ida, you'll make an excellent class president. Thanks, Ida, I said, scratching the back of my head. Aizawa moved on to the actual lesson plan for the day, but even as the class settled back into normalcy, I couldn't ignore the new atmosphere in the room. After homeroom wrapped up and most of the class had settled down, I found myself walking beside Ida in the hallway. The quiet steps echoed slightly as we made our way toward the cafeteria. He adjusted his glasses, posture always stiff and composed. Izuku, it still feels a little strange, I said quietly, glancing over at him. Izuku, that I ended up as class president instead of you. He tilted his head slightly, eyes sharp as ever behind those lenses. Izuku, Why would you say that, Midoriya? Well, I started, scratching the side of my head. Izuku, you've always been serious about class rules, keeping things orderly. Honestly, you're more put together for the job than I am. Ida's mouth pressed into a thin line. Ida, that may be true, but leadership is not only about maintaining order. It's also about earning the trust of your peers. And evidently, our classmates trust you to represent them. I would be remiss to ignore that fact. I wasn't sure how to answer that. I simply nodded once, feeling a strange mix of responsibility and awkwardness hanging over my shoulders. Just as I was about to change the subject, the sharp blaring of an alarm cut through the hallway. The red lights began flashing along the walls. The steady wail of the siren echoed louder than anything else. Immediately, the calm atmosphere shattered like glass. Students poured out of classrooms in waves. The hallways filled with shouting voices, quick footsteps, people bumping into each other without even realizing. Achiko, what's going on? Uraraka's voice came from behind me. I turned just in time to see her gripping the strap of her bag tightly, eyes wide. Ida's eyes narrowed, hand lifting like he was instinctively preparing for some sort of drill. Ida, it's the emergency security system. Alarms aren't triggered from minor incidents. This is serious. We were all caught up in the sudden tension. Someone shouted about possible villains. Someone else mentioned a breach. Ida, this isn't good, Ida said sharply, eyes scanning the mass of students. Ida, at this rate, people could get hurt just from the panic. I glanced at him, then back at the crowd. My heart thudded once. Without really thinking about it, I took a deep breath and raised my voice, stepping forward. Izuku, everyone, calm down. Nobody heard me over the alarm and their own shouting. I gritted my teeth slightly, activating my quirk. X-ray vision swept through the walls, layers of the building pulling back in my mind like paper. My eyes narrowed in focus, tracing the source of the breach. Reporters. That was it. They'd managed to force their way onto the ground somehow. I could see them clustered near the front entrance, flashing cameras and microphones still clutched in their hands. I let out a breath, some of the tension in my chest easing slightly. But then, just as I was about to cut off my quirk, I caught sight of someone else. A figure standing farther back from the press, near the edge of the property. Alone. Not holding any cameras. No microphone. Just standing there, hands in his pockets, head tilted slightly downward. Something about him set every instinct in my body on edge. There was no movement, no reaction to the siren or the chaos around him. Like he wasn't really part of the scene at all. My stomach clenched, but I pushed it down. No need to panic everyone else. First, calm things down here. Ida, I said quickly, tapping him on the shoulder. Ida, it's the press. Reporters got onto school grounds. That's all. His eyes widened slightly. Are you sure? I saw them, I confirmed, voice steady. Izuku, yeah, remember I have enhanced vision. No villains. Just reporters. Relief flickered in his expression for a split second before he straightened, regaining his usual composed tone. In that case, he turned toward the crowd, lifting his hands high above his head like a conductor before an orchestra. Everyone listen. It still wasn't enough. People were too far into their panic to hear him. Uraraka grabbed my sleeve lightly. Achiko, Midoriya, what do we do? I clenched my fist, stepped forward again, and this time I pushed out my voice as hard as I could. Izuku, everyone, calm down. It's not villains. It's just the press. That caught a few ears. Heads turned. Ida, catching the shift in energy, added in a loud, clear voice. Ida, I repeat. The breach is due to the press only. There is no threat to student safety. Please, return to your classrooms in an orderly fashion. Slowly, like a ripple moving through a pond, people began slowing down. The wave of panic ebbed bit by bit as the message spread. Students stopped running, some of them breathing heavily as they turned toward each other in confusion. Mina looked over at me from a few paces away. Mina, seriously? Just reporters? Yeah, I confirmed, letting out a slow breath as I stood beside Ida now. False alarm. Kaminari, man, That was way too much, 𝗵𝗲 said, leaning against the wall and wiping sweat from his forehead. Once things finally settled, the red lights stopped flashing. The siren cut off. In the relative quiet that followed, Ida and I shared a glance before heading back to our classroom with everyone else. As soon as we stepped inside, Aizawa-sensei was waiting, arms crossed, expression as unreadable as always. His gaze flicked toward me for a moment. "Midoriya," he said, voice low and even. "Aizawa, you saw what happened." "Yeah," I said quietly, stepping closer so the others wouldn't overhear. "Izuku, it was reporters. But there was someone else." Aizawa's brow twitched slightly. "Explain." "Izuku, there was a guy standing outside the gates," I murmured. "Izuku, not with the press. I don't know who he was, but something felt off. He didn't move. He just stood there, watching everything." Aizawa didn't answer right away. His eyes narrowed slightly as he processed that. "You're sure? Positive?" He glanced out the window briefly, as if he might spot the figure himself, then returned his gaze to me. "Aizawa, good work, Midoriya. I'll check into it. For now, keep that between us." "Understood." I stepped back, letting the others return to their conversations as if nothing had happened. But that image of the man standing alone just beyond the press stayed sharp in my mind. Something told me this wasn't over. Not yet. The faculty room was unusually tense as the evening sun filtered through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished floor. Midnight stood near the now destroyed gate, eyes narrowed as she ran her fingers lightly along its surface. Her voice broke the heavy quiet. "Midnight, it looks like it was erased," she said slowly, her tone thoughtful but edged with concern. The gates looked like it decayed. The other teachers gathered around her, each of them looking at the panel with varying degrees of focus. Present Mike leaned forward, squinting at the screen. "Yamada? Yo, that's not normal. That thing's supposed to log everything, no exceptions." 𝗬𝗵𝗲 stood silently beside 𝗧𝗵𝗲, arms crossed over his thick chest, face as stoic as ever. His gaze shifted to Aizawa, who had his usual tired expression but with a noticeable tightness around the eyes. It was clear he wasn't ignoring the situation. Aizawa finally spoke, voice low and calm but carrying weight. "Aizawa, Midoriya said he saw someone who looked suspicious outside the school. Said the guy wasn't part of the press. He was just standing there, watching everything. Maybe it was that guy that caused it. Someone doing this kind of damage wouldn't be a stretch." 𝗧𝗵𝗲 adjusted his hat slightly, voice rumbling in that slow drawl of his. "𝗧𝗵𝗲, a student spotted something we missed, huh? That's a sharp kid." "Midnight, it isn't just sharp," Midnight added, glancing over her shoulder. "Midnight, that overpowered kid in your class. Midoriya. Is there any other ability he doesn't have at this point?" The question hung in the air for a moment. All Might, standing by the window with his arms crossed and a serious look on his face, finally broke his silence. "All Might, Midoriya's growth. It's faster than we expected. His quirk has layers we're still trying to fully understand. X-ray vision, physical strength, speed, invulnerability, and even flight, tactical instinct. But his attitude, his control, that's what keeps him steady." 𝗬𝗵𝗲 spoke up then, voice deep and deliberate. "𝗬𝗵𝗲, we've all seen his records. Multiple abilities layered on top of combat skills. That's not typical even for elite heroes. How do we handle that in a school setting?" Aizawa didn't flinch. His tone was as flat as ever. "Aizawa, we handle it by keeping an eye on him. No matter how talented he is, he's still a student. We guide him like anyone else. Make sure that power doesn't get ahead of his judgment." Hound Dog, who'd been silent until then, leaned against the doorframe, scratching idly behind his ear like he was processing the situation. His voice was rough and quiet. "Hound Dog, still. It says something, doesn't it? That it wasn't any of us who noticed the suspicious figure first. It was him." The room settled into another pause, weighty and quiet except for the faint buzz of electricity from the panel. Midnight sighed, stepping back from the console. "Midnight, someone doing this kind of damage serious," she said. "Midnight, we'll have to report this. But about Midoriya." Her gaze flicked from Aizawa to All Might. "Midnight, you two especially. Keep an eye on him. Talent like that attracts attention, good and bad. All Might gave a firm nod, though his face remained thoughtful. Aizawa just closed his eyes for a moment, as though already planning ahead. Yamada, present Mike, leaned back with a shrug. Yamada, guess Class 1A really is the hot spot this year. Not just with villains, either. Aizawa opened his eyes again and stepped toward the door. Aizawa, I'll handle informing Nizu. Make sure this doesn't go public. Last thing we need is more media swarming the gates. With that, the teachers began filing out, each absorbed in their own thoughts. The sun had dipped lower now, shadows stretching even longer across the polished floors. A faint breeze stirred the air through an open window, but no one seemed to notice.